Welcome to the journey of realizing your most extraordinary dreams. In Make Your Dreams Come True, renowned author Orison Swett Marden invites you on an inspiring voyage toward personal transformation and the discovery of your limitless potential. Marden's timeless wisdom and unique insights will guide you through the secrets of turning your dreams into a vibrant reality. Envision a world where every positive thought plants a seed of possibility and every desire brings you closer to realization. Marden's words serve not just as advice, but as a guiding light on your path to a fulfilling life. With a blend of creative visualization techniques and practical strategies for overcoming obstacles, each chapter will expand your understanding of the power within you. As you delve into Marden's inspiring text, you'll feel a surge of motivation in every part of your being. This book is more than just a read. It's a golden key to unlocking a future where your dreams are not just attainable but tangible. Prepare to challenge your limits, explore new possibilities, and embrace a reality where your potential is boundless. Welcome to Make Your Dreams Come True with Orison Swett Marden, where the only limits are those of your imagination and the depth of your dreams. Every great human soul has had its vision and has meditated until the passion to realize the dream dominates their life. You will be what you want to be. Let failure find its false content in this poor, ambient world, but the spirit scorns it and is free. The human will, this invisible force, the offspring of an immortal soul, can carve a path to any goal, even if granite walls stand in its way. Washington, in a letter written when he was only 12 years old, said, "I will marry a beautiful woman. I will be one of the richest men in the country. I will lead the army of my colony. I will govern the nation I will help create." General Grant, in his memoirs, said that when he was a child at West Point, he saw General Scott sitting on his horse reviewing the cadets, and something within him said, "Ulysses, one day you will ride in his place and be the general of the army." Everyone knows how these childhood visions were realized by mature men. The fortune of the late J.P. Morgan was built largely through the dynamic force of his thinking, his mental visualization, and the nurturing of his youthful visions. He was a man of varied and aesthetic tastes, but focused on finance and became the master of the world in his field. Ancient Greece focused on beauty and art, and became the great model of beauty and the master of art in the world. The Roman Empire focused on power and became the master of the world. England focused on controlling the seas and trade, and became the sovereign of the seas and the greatest trading nation in the world. We are a nation of moneymakers because Americans have focused greatly on the dollar. They think in terms of dollars, dream of dollars, hate poverty, and aspire to wealth. Everything that an individual or a people focuses on tends to be obtained, as concentration is a force as powerful as electricity. The young person who focuses on law, thinks about law, dreams of law, reads everything they can find related to law, goes to court to listen to trials whenever possible, is very likely to become a lawyer. The same applies to any other vocation or art, whether it be medicine, engineering, literature, music, or any other science or art. Those who focus on an idea, who continue to visualize their dreams, who nurture them, who never lose sight of their goal, no matter how dark or forbidden the path may be, achieve what they focus on. They turn their minds into a powerful magnet to attract what they have focused on and sooner or later realize their dreams. What could have prevented Old Bull from becoming a master of music? Who or what could have prevented a child who defied his father's displeasure from sneaking out of bed at night to go up to the attic and play his little red violin, chasing his dreams and not letting them sleep? What could have prevented a Faraday or an Edison, who were not daunted by any difficulty, from realizing the wonderful visions of their childhood? If you can focus your thoughts and maintain them with persistence, or work with them along the line of your greatest ambition, nothing can prevent their realization. But concentration and spasmodic enthusiasm, no matter how intense, will eventually wear out. Dreaming without effort will only waste your power. It is the maintenance of your vision combined with persistent and focused effort that will allow you to realize your dreams. What succeeds are the thousands of devices in the patent office in Washington that have never been useful to the world, simply because the inventors did not hold on to their vision long enough to bring it to fruition. They became discouraged, stopped striving, let their visions fade, and thus became demagnetized and lost the power to realize them. Other inventors picked up many of these near successes, added the missing links to complete them, and turned them into true successes. "Prepare your trade and your distaff, and God will send the flax," says the proverb. If we took to heart the promises of God and did our necessary part for their fulfillment, no one would be unhappy or a failure. If we intensely send out our desires, if we visualize them until our own mentality vibrates with the things we desire, and if we work persistently in their direction, we would attract them. Everywhere there are disillusioned men and women who have made their lives bitter because they could not obtain what they desired, a musical or artistic education, the training needed to be writers, lawyers, doctors, engineers, or for another vocation to which they felt called. They struggle in an unpromising environment and complain about the fate that has robbed them. They feel that life has deceived them, while the truth is that they have deceived themselves. They never prepared the trade and the distaff that would have attracted the flax to weave a vital, happy, and complete fabric. They did not insistently and persistently send out their desires and aspirations, did not nourish them, and refused to give them up. Most importantly, they did not put their best efforts into their realization. 3 things we must do for our dreams to come true: visualize our desire, focus on our vision, and work to bring it into reality. The tools needed for this are within use, not outside. Regardless of the chances of birth or fortune, there is only one force by which we must shape our material life: the mind. The bee and the serpent extract material from the same plant. One turns it into deadly venom, the other into delicious honey. The power that transforms matter into a new substance is in the bee and the serpent. Of 2 children in the same miserable environment, one acquires an education, trains to obtain a position and power, while the other grows up as an anonymous. Everything is in the child. Each has similar material to work with. One transmutes it into gold, the other into lead. 2 sailors use the same breeze to send their ships in opposite directions. It is not the wind, but the way the sail is set that determines the port. The power that transforms our desire or vision into reality is not in our environment or any external condition. It is within us. There is an invisible, unknown magnetic force developed by prolonged concentration of the mind on a cherished desire that attracts the reality corresponding to that desire. We cannot say what this force is that draws from the ethereal cosmos what we desire and makes it objective, giving it form to match our desire. We only know that it exists. The ethereal cosmos that surrounds us is filled with unimaginable powers, and the strong and focused mind reaches this ether, attracts it to itself, and makes the desire objective. All human achievements have been drawn from the invisible by the brain through the mind, which reaches and shapes the wealth of material at its disposal into forms that match desires. All the great discoveries, inventions, and feats that have lifted man from his animal existence were forged from reality by perpetual thought and visualization of these things by their creators. These great figures clung to their vision, nurtured it until they became powerful magnets that attracted the realization of their dreams from universal intelligence. Most revolutionary inventions evolved from a flash of thought. The sewing machine, for example, started with a simple idea that the inventor maintained persistently in his mind until, through his efforts, the idea materialized into concrete reality. Elias Howe often saw his wife making clothes, sewing late into the night, which made him wonder if all this work was truly necessary. Observing her needle flying from side to side, he began to wonder if this same task, which a woman spent so much time doing, could not be accomplished with less effort and in half the time by some mechanical device. He continued to nurture his idea, thinking how wonderful it would be if someone could relieve millions of women from this work, often done at night after a long day's labor. He started experimenting with various devices, clinging to his vision despite poverty and the criticism of friends who thought the man must be crazy to waste his time on such a silly idea. But in the end, his vision materialized into a wonderful reality, a perfected machine that emancipated women around the world from endless monotony. The idea for the telephone came to Professor Alexander Bell when he passed a cord through a hole at the bottom of a tin can, discovering that it was possible to transmit the voice. The idea so consumed the inventor that it deprived him of sleep and left him poor for a time, but nothing could take away his vision or prevent him from striving to move it from the visionary phase into reality. I lived near Professor Bell, in the next room, while he worked on his invention. I witnessed many of his struggles with poverty, heard the criticisms and reproaches from his friends as he persisted in his visionary work until his telephone became a reality without which modern business could not function. All of Edison's inventions and those of all inventors were realized according to the same principle that gave us the sewing machine and the telephone. They all started with simple ideas, with dreamed visions that were nurtured and transformed into realities. According to Darwin, the desire to soar in the skies preceded the appearance and development of the eagle's wings. It is said that our various organs and functions developed from a sense of need within them, just as the eagle's wings developed from the desire to fly. The cells of the brain grow in response to desire. Where there is no desire, there is no growth. The brain develops further in the direction of the main ambition, where mental activities are most pronounced. The desire for a musical career, for example, develops the musical neurons. Ambition for business develops the part of the brain related to business, the cells involved in executive management, business administration, and money-making. Wherever we make a demand on the brain through desire, that part will respond with growth. For years, a poor peasant builds castles in Spain about his future, visualizing the great commercial establishment he will manage. The mockery of his family and youthful peers can neither slow him down nor tarnish the brilliant vision he sees afar. He continues to nurture his vision, and soon, from the unknown, unexpected resources emerge, and he finds himself as a clerk in a large trading house in the city of his dreams. He observes everything with an eagle's eye, absorbs information and ideas, is alert, active, energetic, and ingenious, and within a few months he is promoted and then promoted again. He attracts the attention of the head of the establishment, who calls him into his private office and tells him that he has noticed him for many months and thinks he is the young man he is looking for to manage the business. He gives him some shares. The business prospers even more under his direction, and within a few years, the new manager becomes a full partner in the house where he entered as a clerk. This is the blossoming of his dream, the objectification of his vision, the alignment of his youthful aspirations with reality. His brain continuously developed along the line of his vision, attracting the elements to make it a reality. A poor young girl, the daughter of humble people from Maine, who thought that becoming a public singer was an unforgivable sin, could initially see no possible way to achieve her secretly kept dreams. But she continued to visualize her dream, to nurture her desire and to do the only thing her parents allowed for its realization, singing in the choir of a small church. Gradually, the path opened, and one step led to another, until the little girl from Maine became the famous Madame Nordica, one of the world's greatest singers. No matter if you are a poor girl from the countryside and don't believe it's possible to leave your old father and mother to pursue your career, don't set aside your desire, whether it's music, art, literature, business, or a profession. Hold on to it. No matter how bleak the outlook may seem, keep visualizing your desire, and light and opportunity will come to help you realize it. Whatever the Creator has prepared you to do, He will provide the opportunity if you cling to your vision and do your best to achieve it. Think of the Nordic Lines, the Lightstones, the Louisa Scotts, the Mary Lyons, the Dr. Anna Howards, and the thousands of women who, just like you, were thwarted by poverty or prohibitive circumstances of any kind, yet they still managed to achieve what they desired, to become what they aspired to be. Encourage yourself and believe that God has also given you all the divine tools to chart the path to the desire of your soul. If you are a farm boy and feel like a born engineer, but can't see a way to get a technical education, don't lose courage or hope. Obtain all the books you can on your specialty, cling to your vision, push in every possible direction. It may take years, but if you stay true to yourself, your focus on your desire and your push towards it will open a door to light, and before you know it, you will be on the path to your goal. Washingtons, Lincolns, Faradays, Edisons, those who have done the most for their country and for humanity, had to struggle as hard as you do to reach the desire of their hearts. The opportunities for boys and girls today to achieve what the Creator has implanted in them are 10 times greater than they were 100, 50, or even 25 years ago. The great danger of our time is not the lack of opportunities, but losing our vision, letting our ambition die. Most of us, instead of taking our desires seriously, play with them as if they were just a game, as if they could never become realities. We don't believe in their divinity. We consider the desires of our heart, the aspirations of our soul, as whims, as romantic fancies of the imagination. However, we know that every invention, every discovery that has blessed the world began with a desire, with the aspiration to produce or do a determined thing, and that persistent desire, accompanied by a struggle to turn the mental image into reality, tends to realize itself. We find it hard to understand that ambition, coupled with effort, is indeed a creative force that tends to manifest. Our minds are like the doubting disciple who wouldn't believe his Lord had risen until he had placed his finger in the wound made by a cruel spear. Only the things we see seem real to us, while in reality, the most real things in the world are those we cannot see. We never doubt the existence of the force that pushes the sprout from the seed, the foliage and the flower from the sprout, the fruits and vegetables from the flower. It is invisible. We cannot feel it, but we know it is more powerful than anything we see. No one can see, hear, or feel gravitation or the forces that balance the Earth and make it whirl at lightning speed through space, guiding it around its orbit without a variation of 1/10 of a second in a century. Yet who can doubt their reality? Does anyone doubt the power of electricity because it cannot be seen, heard, or felt? The power of our desires, the aspirations of our soul, when supported by the effort to realize them, is as real as any invisible force in the great laboratory of nature. The great cosmic ether is filled with invisible potentialities. Everything that comes out of it towards you is in response to your call. Everything you have achieved in life has been the result of a psychic law that you have followed consciously or unconsciously. Don't make the mistake of thinking that the path won't open, because you cannot now see any possible way to achieve what you desire. The very intensity of your desire for a certain career, for doing a particular thing, is the best proof that you have the ability to achieve it, and that this ability has been given to you with a purpose, even to play a divine and magnificent role in the grand universal plan. Desire is simply the precursor to realization. It is the seed that will germinate if nourished with much effort. However, if one stops at the sowing of the seed, one will achieve the same result as a farmer who sows seeds without preparing the soil, fertilizing it, cultivating it, or removing weeds. It is the blend of the practical and the ideal that brings forth the harvest. From the thought of the seed must follow the struggle towards your ideal. No matter how dark and prohibitive the path before you seems, imagine that you carry a lantern that moves with you, illuminating just enough for the next step. It is not necessary to see the end of the path. All the light you need is for the next step. There is no doubt that if we do our part, the divinity that created us has assigned us a place and a task in the universe's plan, and everything will unfold better than we can plan or even imagine. Send forth and cherish your desires. Nourish your aspirations and heartfelt wishes with all the intensity and persistence you can muster. They will grow, take tangible form, and eventually become realities. Send your desires into the cosmic ether with courage and the greatest confidence. There, you will gather the material that will build the reality of your dream castle. The problem with us is that we fear doing so. We dread that fate will mock us, that it will render our mental visions void. We do not understand the laws that govern our mental forces, just as we do not understand the laws that govern the universe. If we had faith in their power, our sincere thoughts and efforts would germinate, grow, and bloom like the tiny seed we plant in the earth. Consider how a seed must be cared for and nurtured before it gives new life. Observe how the delicate bud must be coaxed by the sun and air for many months before it pushes its head through the hard ground towards the light. Suppose it feared trying and said, "It is impossible for me to break out of this dark earth. Here there is no light. I am so tender that the slightest pressure would crush me and halt my growth forever. The only way out of my prison is to push upward through this hard ground, and it would require enormous strength to do so. It would crush and strangle me before I am even halfway. But the sun attracts, coaxes, and encourages the bud to attempt the impossible. And behold, in a few days, it lifts its tender head above what it once considered the great enemy of its progress, the dark ground. What it once thought impossible becomes its support and strength. The very struggle to break through the soil has strengthened its fibers and prepared it to face the elements above, the storms it must endure. Just like that tender plant, you may find yourself surrounded by seemingly insurmountable obstacles. You may not see a ray of light through the tough and prohibitive circumstances. But hold on to your vision and keep pushing. In your struggle, you will develop strength, find sun and air, and grow. Perhaps you are trapped in an unpleasant occupation and are tempted to get discouraged and abandon your dreams because you don't see how to improve. This is the time to cling to them and insist that they become reality. Without knowing it, you might be right in the middle of the tough ground. If you continue to push through time and adversity, you will reach the sunlight and air, freedom. There is no human being who lacks some form of opportunity. If your current position limits you, if it does not give you the space to express yourself, you can create space by filling it to the fullest, doing your work as well as possible, and keeping your mind firmly fixed on the ladder of your ascent. In your mind, you build the ladder by which you climb or descend. No one else can do it for you. The master key that will open that cruel door holding you back is not in the hand of fate. You create it with your thoughts. Your next step is exactly where you are in what you are doing today. The door to something better is always in the duty of the moment. The spirit with which you do your work, the energy you devote to it, the determination with which you support your ambition, these are the forces that open the door to something better. If you cling to your vision and are honest, sincere, and true, nothing will prevent its realization. I have never known anyone who diligently strove to achieve the desire of their heart and did not ultimately reach their goal. No great desire, persistent, insistent, and honest, supported by hard and conscientious work, ever returns empty-handed. Desire is the foundation of all achievement. We are the product of our desires. What we desire, the vision we hold, is our great life shaper, our character molder. Very few people realize the close coordination between their visions, their mental images, and the actual achievements of their careers. If I were to name the main cause of most failures in life, I would say it is the inability to understand this, to grasp the relationship between thought and achievement. The gradual weakening of dreams, the loss of vision, can be traced back to this cause. When we start out in life, we are enthusiastic. Our vision is bright and alluring, and we feel certain that we will succeed in doing something distinctive, individual, and unusual. But after a few setbacks and failures, we lose courage and faith in our vision, and it begins to die. Gradually, we realize that our ambition starts to deteriorate. It is no longer as defined as before. Our ideals fade a bit. Our desires become less insistent. We try to find reasons and excuses for our declining efforts and enthusiasm. We think it might be due to overwork, that we are tired and need rest, or that our health is not perfect, and that with time, our intense desire to achieve our dreams will return. But the process is so insidious that, before we know it, our flames, lacking fuel, have grown very weak. Our attachment to our vision was not strong enough. We did not grasp half of its powerful force, when it is firmly and persistently held in the mind, to help us reach our goal. What we get from life largely depends on the fidelity of our visions. If we believe in them, we will not let them die from lack of care. If we truly have the ability to realize them and are not deluded by selfishness, petty vanity, and complacency, no disgrace, no failure of plans, no discouragement, no obstacle, nothing in the world can separate us from them. We will cling to them until the day we die. The person who believes in their vision of life, who is neither a mere egoist nor a lazy dreamer, who sees in their desire a prophecy of something they are perfectly capable of achieving, is the person who moves the world and strives to align their vision with reality. The world makes way for such a person. for someone who believes in their vision and dedicates themselves unreservedly to its realization. People recognize that there is something behind a dreamer who has so much faith in their life dream that they will sacrifice everything to make it real. What degree of mastery does your vision have over you? Does it seize you with a force that only death can release, or does it hold you so lightly that you easily detach from it, discouraged from trying to make it real? Constant discouragement is a great temptation to abandon life's dreams and lower the level of expectation. A person's vision tends to become blurred during major crises, in times of general depression, and during financial stress. But it is truly a mark of strong character to not allow obstacles to divert them from their singular goal. The person made of winning material clings to their vision, even to the point of starving, because they know there is only one way to bring it to earth, to hold on through the storm and stress, despite all obstacles and discouragement. No matter the discouragements, misfortunes, or failures that befall you, do not let anyone or any combination of unfortunate circumstances destroy your faith in your dream, in what you believe you are meant to achieve. It does not matter if the actual facts seem to contradict the results you are pursuing, or who opposes you, or how many others may mistreat and condemn you. Cling to your vision, for it is sacred. It is God's impulse within you. You do not have the right to allow it to fade or darken. Your ultimate success will be measured by your ability to cling to your vision despite discouragement, and will largely depend on your perseverance and bulldog tenacity. If you falter under criticism and opposition, you will demagnetize your mind and lose all the momentum you gained in your previous efforts. No matter how dark or threatening the panorama is, keep working, keep visualizing the dream of your life, and surely an unexpected path will open up for its realization. Permanently banish from your mind any thought that you might fail to achieve the goal of your desire. Turn your face toward it. Continue to look steadfastly in the direction of your ambition, whatever it may be. Resolve never to acknowledge defeat, and you will create with your mental attitude and resolution a tremendous force to attract to yourself what you desire. If you have the courage and persistence to persevere until the end, if you consistently maintain a victorious attitude toward your vision, victory will crown your efforts. There is great significance in the passage from St. Mark. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and you will have it. We are asked to believe that what we desire is already accomplished, and if we adopt this attitude, we will achieve our desire. The benefit we derive from prayer is the harmonization and balance of our own mind, bringing us into closer communion and a more vital connection with the Divine Spirit, through which we receive a greater supply of blessings from our Father. Prayer is the opening of the mind's supply channels that block divine entry. It is allowing a greater abundance of the limitless supply that continuously flows from the Supreme Source into our lives. Why do you carry that rosary everywhere? And what use is it to count those beads over and over again? Asked a young girl of her Catholic friend. Mary replied, I could never make you understand the comfort that this rosary brings me. When I am tired, sad, or discouraged about anything, or when I desire something that seems impossible to obtain, I take my rosary and start to pray. Before I have even gone halfway through its beads, everything changes. The feeling of fatigue and discouragement disappears, or if I have asked for something I deeply desire, it no longer seems as distant as before, and I know that even if I do not get exactly what I ask for, I will get something better. Those who are too narrow-minded or prejudiced to see anything good in a belief that is not their own often mock the Catholic custom of praying the rosary. To them, it is merely superstition and nonsense to repeat the same prayer over and over. These people do not understand the philosophy and the religion underlying this beautiful and ancient custom. They do not know the power that resides in the repetition of spoken words and the influence of expressed thoughts. Anyone can verify this for themselves. It is not necessary to have a rosary of beads. You can create your own, an intangible yet very real rosary. And if you pray it not once or twice a day, but over and over, many times, especially before you retire for the night, you will be surprised by the wonderful results. A flaw you wish to correct, a talent or gift you want to develop and improve, money or friends, education, success in any endeavor, satisfaction, mental peace, happiness, the power to serve, power in your work, whatever your desire, make it a bead in your rosary. Pray for its realization, think about it, work for its accomplishment, and your desire will materialize. There are many ways to pray. Not all our prayers are vocalized requests to the Almighty. They are also our inspirations, the inspirations of the soul. Doing and desiring is a prayer. The most sincere prayer can be the heartfelt desire to cultivate a talent or talents, or the intense desire to obtain an education in order to provide greater service to the world. What we dream of and strive for, our efforts to do good, are true prayers. When Jane Addams, as a child, aspired to raise other girls and make them happy, when she dreamed of a time when she would be grown up and do great work in service to humanity, she was already praying. She laid the foundations of Hull House, and Hull House today is a prayer fulfilled. Her entire life, from childhood, was a prayer because it was a preparation for a great and noble work. When little Frances Willard aspired and dreamed in her distant home in Wisconsin, she was praying and building just as surely as in her later years when she was the driving force behind the organization she had founded. "I always wanted to react to the world around me with the greatest power," she said, recounting her life and early aspirations. Lying in the prairie grass and raising her hand to the sky, she would say in the depths of her soul, "What is it? What is the purpose, O God?" These noble aspirations of the heart are, in the truest sense, prayers. A spoken prayer, dressed in beautiful language, one that is spoken from the pulpit to be heard by men, may not be a true prayer at all. The collective prayer of the congregation can often be a facade. I have attended churches where people automatically repeated prayers while looking across the congregation, mentally observing others, their lips moving in a supposed prayer but focused on their attire. There is no real prayer in such a performance. It is not an expression of the soul. It is not a conversation of the heart. It is simply mechanical chatter. The mechanical murmur of prayers in our religious services is an insult to the Creator. He does not listen to prayers that do not come from the heart. Prayer is the sincere desire of the heart, what we aspire to and hope for, which we pray through our own desire and hope. True prayer can struggle in the heart without words. It can be a noble desire, a heartfelt wish that no language can express. It may have a voice or perhaps not, but true prayer always comes from the heart and is always answered. A remarkable illustration of this is provided by a story told by John Wesley. Once he was riding through a dark forest with a large sum of money in his possession. Suddenly, he felt fear, and dismounting, he prayed for protection. Years later, Wesley was called to see a dying man. This man told him that when Wesley had passed through the forest so many years before, a thief had been lurking to steal the money he was carrying. He recounted to Wesley that he had seen Wesley dismount, and at the moment he mounted his horse again to continue on his way. The appearance of an armed assistant riding alongside him filled him with such fear and terror that he abandoned his intention. He sincerely said, "When we are able to pray without fatigue, with love, with certainty, with intelligence, we will find ourselves in immediate harmony with the power, and like a roaring, mighty wind, like a lightning bolt, our will break through all things and share in the power of God." Everyone prays because everyone hopes and desires. Everyone has aspirations and desires they hope will be realized. In a sense, atheists, agnostics, and skeptics, though they may not realize it, pray just as much as believers. For every desire of the heart, every noble inspiration is a prayer. We pray as naturally as we breathe, for the desire for a better, nobler life, for greater and higher achievements, is an unconscious prayer. Prayer is, in reality, the hunger of our heart for unity with the divine, with the eternal. It is the union of the soul with its Creator. It is literally what Philip Brooks described as the gate between God and the soul. Many people confuse the very nature of prayer and complain that praying is useless because their prayers are never answered. The reason is clear and admirably expressed in Irving Bachelet's verses on faith. "Now, don't expect too much from God, that would be unfair. If for everything you want, you could only exchange a prayer, I would pray for yours, and you would pray for mine. and Deacon Henry Hosper would have nothing to do if he didn't lie down and prosper. If all things were so easy, they would have little value, and someone gifted in prayer might be the master of the earth. It is the work you put in to obtain something, the sweat, the blood, and the care that must support your prayer. If your prayers go unanswered, it is because they are not supported by the conditions on which the answer to prayer depends: faith and work. You do not have what you pray for because you do not truly believe you will get it, or because you do not support your prayer with the necessary effort, or because you fail in both aspects. It is a mockery to pray for something without working to obtain it, or to not do everything possible to secure it yourself. Asking God to give us what we desire while being too lazy to help ourselves is begging. In response to our prayers, desires, and efforts, we receive what we ask for from the vast universal supply that is everywhere. Each day, something from our prayer becomes visible. Something forms from the invisible manifested in reality through these two powerful instruments, prayer and work. But if you think that your obstacle will be removed or your desire fulfilled without lifting a finger to help yourself, you could pray until Judgment Day and still get no response. Prayer without faith is useless, and faith without work is a barren virtue. In the second stanza of a small poem titled God's Answer, Ella Wheeler Wilcox gives us the answer: the lament of the discouraged and failing soul that cries out that its prayers are not heard, and no hand is reaching out to lift it to the heights it longs to attain. Then God replies, 3 things I have given you: a clear brain, a courageous will, and a strength of mind and heart, all divine tools to shape the path. For until you do your part with all your might, let no one dare to pray. The answer to your prayers is within yourself. The answer lies in your obedience to natural and spiritual laws. If you do not do your part in the real world, down to the smallest detail, your prayer is destined to come back to you unanswered. The entire universe has its price, a perfectly legitimate price. You can achieve what you desire if you are willing to pay the price, which is an honest, serious, and persistent effort to make it yours. The Creator responds to your prayer by making you capable of answering yourself, allowing you to practice the law of supply and demand. The fundamental principle on which the response to prayer rests is that you must be in perfect harmony with what you pray for. You cannot force it, you must attract it. The answer to prayer does not come merely to the receptive mind in a positive condition, i.e., in a condition conducive to creation and realization. The law of affirmation and the law of prayer are one and the same. Affirm what you desire, work for it, and it will manifest in your life. Affirm it with confidence, with maximal faith, without doubting what you affirm. Tell yourself, I am what I believe I am, and I cannot be anything else. But if you affirm, I am health, I am prosperity, I am this or that, without believing it, it will not help you. The affirmation must be supported by belief in what you affirm. You must constantly strive to be what you affirm, or your affirmations will be nothing but empty words. Make your mind a rosary of new thoughts, not formal, rigid prayers, but an original one with pearls that are the aspirations of your heart, your desires to become the strong, radiant, successful, and happy person the Creator has placed within you. If you are unhappy, burdened by repeated failures and disillusionments, suffering from the stings of frustrated ambition, put this pearl in your rosary and recite it often to yourself. Whether it is Mary or John, address yourself. God made you for success, not failure. He never made anyone a failure. You are perverting the great design of your existence by yielding to discouragement, by wandering among your peers with a long, sad, and dejected face, as if you were an outcast, as if there were no place for you in the vast, joyful world of abundance. You were made to express joy, to go through life with a victorious attitude, like a conqueror. The image of God is within you. You must bring it out and present it to the world. Do not dishonor your Creator by violating His image, by being anything but the magnificent man or woman He intended you to be. Support every pearl or prayer you place in your rosary with actions throughout the day. Otherwise, you might as well save the effort of stringing your beads, for it is the work you put in to obtain something the sweat, the blood, and the care, that must support the type of argument that should back your prayer. Do not be afraid to think highly of yourself, not in a selfish sense, but because the Creator made you in His image. You have inherited divine qualities and omnipotent possibilities. It is an affront to God to waste what He has made and declared good. If you are a victim of shyness and self-contempt, if you are afraid to say that your soul belongs to you, if you drag yourself through the world as if you think you occupy a place that belongs to someone else, if you avoid any attention directed at you, if you are timid, confused with your tongue tied when you should assert yourself, return to your rosary and add another bead. Tell yourself, I am a child of the King of Kings. I will no longer allow this cowardly shyness to govern me. I am a prince of heaven, made by the same Creator who made all other human beings. They are my brothers and sisters. There is no more reason for me to fear expressing what I feel or think in front of them than if they were my own family. I have as much right on this earth as any potentate, as much right to hold my head high and command respect as any monarch. I am my father's heir, and have all the rights of a prince. I have inherited the riches of the universe. The earth, the stars, and the sun are mine. I will abandon this eternal self-contempt, this habit of apologizing for being alive. It is a crime against myself. From now on I will behave like a prince, act like one, and walk the earth as a conqueror. Today, I will not let any opportunity to assume any responsibility that elevates me, to express my opinion, to assert myself where and when necessary, pass me by. This spectre, this shadow of self-contempt that has held me back for so long, that has darkened my path in life, must disappear. From now on, I will walk facing the sun, so that the shadows of life fall behind me, not across my path as before. I will face life with an attitude of self-confidence and victory, with a hopeful perspective, because I know I am destined for victory. From now on, I will think more highly of myself. I will no longer sell myself short, depreciate myself. The attitude of inferiority is over. I know I am born for victory, born to conquer. I will succeed in this great and inspiring game of life. If you feel you lack initiative or are not entrepreneurial, boldly affirm the opposite and add this affirmation to your rosary. Strongly affirm your ability to start things, to do them to the best of your ability, and to see them through to completion. Learn to trust in the God within you. This trust is a divine force that will propel you forward. Never again allow yourself to harbor thoughts of inferiority or deficiency. Tell yourself, I will assert my masculinity or femininity and stand for something. I will be a force in the world, not a weakling. I was created to make my life a masterpiece, not a makeshift. I was created for a great end, and I will achieve that end. There are forces within me that, if awakened and activated, would revolutionize my life. I will control and utilize them. I will discover myself and use 100% of my capacity instead of a small, miserable fraction. If you are obsessed with the idea that you are not as brilliant, that you do not have as many abilities as most people, if your parents and teachers have labeled you as boring, slow, or stupid until you lost confidence in yourself, if you find yourself shrinking due to the idea of your inferiority, whether because of what others have said about you or your own thoughts, you must change all that. You must affirm your capability, firmly hold the ideal of the capable and effective man or woman you desire to be and who is within you to become. Not only must you affirm your power to do what you desire, but you must replace the image of your inferiority with the ideal of completeness, the full man or woman that the Creator intended you to be. Cling to that ideal of yourself. Assert your superiority. Soon, you will dispel the diminished, inferior, and flawed image that others or your own false thoughts have established in your subconscious. Keeping in mind the truth, the perfect ideal will give you the confidence and security to do what you are capable of doing. Thousands of students have failed their exams, not due to their inability to answer the questions, but due to the fear, the loss of confidence induced by the idea of their inferiority. This is especially true for nervous and sensitive natures. If you are obsessed with the idea of failure, if you visualize an inferior image of yourself, you will be obsessed with the idea of failure, with thoughts of your inefficacy. You will make success in any endeavor nearly impossible. If, for some reason, you have fallen into the habit of failure, you will need to make a very determined effort to get out of it, otherwise your life will truly be a failure. I know an effective and ambitious young man, but when the opportunity he has perhaps worked for so long arrives, his courage falters. He does not feel up to it. He sees how another person might accomplish what is necessary, but he fears it is too late for him. He has never done anything like this before and is afraid to try because he might fail. Now, if you feel this way about yourself, just add another bead to your rosary. Remove the words "I can't" from your vocabulary and replace them with "I can." Napoleon, one of the greatest conquerors the world has known, hated the words "I can't" and never used them if he could avoid it. He did not believe in the impossible. When praised for his audacity and genius in crossing the Alps in the middle of winter, he said, "I deserve no credit except for refusing to believe those who said it could not be done." Have you ever thought that every time you say "I can't," you weaken your self-confidence and your power to accomplish things? Have you ever met someone who has a lot of "I can't" and excuses in their vocabulary, but still accomplishes a lot? Some people always use phrases like, "Oh, I can't do that. I can't afford that. I can't go there. I can't undertake such a difficult task. Let someone else do it." These negative affirmations undermine power. Do not entertain them. In all matters related to success, let your rosary deal with affirmations rather than "I can't." Say, "I can, I must, I will." Start what you fear to undertake, and half of your difficulties will disappear. If you feel distressed, anxious, like Martha, troubled by many things, if you suffer from all kinds of discord, if you do not feel well, it will comfort you greatly to turn to your rosary and repeat some of the precious biblical promises. No plague or pain shall come near your dwelling. Here is the promise for those who dwell in the secret place of the Most High. I restore your health and heal your wounds. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. The Lord is my refuge, my fortress, in whom I trust. You shall not fear the terror by night, nor the arrow that flies by day. Certainly, he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the destructive plague. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you shall find refuge. Contemplating God and frequently repeating these beautiful biblical passages will increase your faith and your awareness of your unity with the infinite. Make it a rule never to affirm about your health, success, or yourself what you do not want to see realized. Do not say that you feel sick, exhausted, miserable, or unmotivated. Never recount your pains and discomforts to others, for each grave repetition engraves deeper into your consciousness the dark images of these conditions, rather than alleviating them. Instead, tell yourself, the power I believe in and that supports me at every moment of my life repairs, renews, restores, and heals me. I am health, vigor, I am power, I am everything I believe myself to be. Refuse to see or maintain, even for a moment, an imperfect, discordant image of sin or disease of yourself. Do not allow a suggestion of your physical or mental inferiority to remain. Always imagine yourself as someone great, strong, splendid, pure, true, beautiful, a sublime example of humanity. Do not allow yourself to nurture thoughts of physical or mental weakness. Think of health, power, or perfection with every breath. Persist in maintaining the thought of yourself according to the ideal your Creator envisioned for you when He formed you. Cling to health without blemish, weakness, or flaw. If you have a very nervous temperament and it erupts at the slightest stimulus, causing in your brain furious fires as destructive to your mental and physical strength as large forest fires to the vast expanses of territory they cover, you thus diminish all your powers and jeopardize your success, happiness, and even your life. Ask anyone what the effects of inflamed minds, uncontrolled anger, jealous rage, vengeance, hatred, and all explosive passions are. Ask the poorhouses, the insane asylums, the morgues. Inquire in all the records of human devastation everywhere what the fruits of uncontrolled passions of all kinds are. Anger, whatever its cause, is a temporary madness. If you are used to losing your composure, to getting upset over something trivial, if you could see the wretched spectacle, the ridiculous display you make of yourself on such occasions, when you become furious because you miss a train or because you believe someone insults you, when you descend from the throne of your reason and let the beast sit and govern in your place, you would be so remorseful and mortified that you would spare no effort to free yourself from your fault. No one in their right mind would allow themselves to make such a ridiculous and contemptible display of themselves. You only do so when you are under the stress of furious passion, when you lose your power due to this temporary madness. Maintaining self-control, mental stability, serenity in the face of all provocations, great or small, is a sign of strong and noble character. It is a victory of strength over weakness, of greatness over smallness. The behavior of conquering oneself is the behavior of victory. It strengthens all faculties. You can call upon this great force of control to aid you by invoking the divinity within you, affirming your unity with the divinity that is eternal calm. Tell yourself, the image of God is within me. I am of divine lineage. I am not destined to be the slave of passion. It is unworthy of a true man or woman to be the toy of temperament or any kind of explosive and tearing passion. There is something divine in me, and I will not allow my lower nature to take control. Constant affirmation of your unity with your Creator will give you a wonderful sense of power and help you overcome any obstacle, but it must be very positive, very insistent, and persistent in your affirmations. No matter what flaw you are trying to overcome or what good quality you wish to acquire, there must be no weakness, indecision, or hesitation in your affirmations or efforts. If you have the fatal habit of indecision, if you are hesitant, weak, and constantly reconsidering things because you are unsure if you made the right decision, if you allow your doubts to question the wisdom of your choice, you will be unable to reach an intelligent conclusion. Under no circumstances can you cure the curse of indecision by affirming your power to see clearly, think quickly, and act decisively. If you doubt which career choice to make, if you hesitate about which path to take in any difficulty, whatever your problem, seek illumination, and the divine inner power will come to your aid and guide you correctly. Repeat "I am" at every moment. I am positive. I can finally decide with vigor and firmness. Resolve each morning that throughout this day you will make decisions without the possibility of second-guessing or reconsidering them. First, thoroughly and carefully review the subject to decide. When making your decision, use the best judgment available to you, and then close the matter. You will secure yourself against hesitation by refusing, once the matter is closed, to question whether you made the wisest choice, resisting any temptation to reopen the subject for reconsideration. If you feel that somewhere in your nature you are cowardly, you can wonderfully strengthen this faculty by maintaining the ideal of courage, thinking about and reading about heroic people and things, and keeping the thought of boldness that you are a child of God and fear nothing on earth. Study the stories of heroic lives. Think, act, and live with a heroic mindset. Say, I am a child of God, and I was never made to shrink back, to be afraid. Fear is not an attribute of divinity. I am courageous, I have courage, I am a conqueror. If you suffer from the disease of poverty, if your whole life has been stunted by poverty, imbued with thoughts and beliefs of poverty, if you have steered your destiny towards poverty, simply turn your head and implement the law of abundance. Turn towards prosperity and success instead of poverty and failure. All the good things you need are your inheritance. Claim them, expect them, work and pray for them, and they will manifest in your life. Make this last stanza from the magnificent poem by Elbert Hubbard a new bead in your rosary. Repeat it frequently and work with joy, confidence, and courage to see it come true. I am a success. Although I am hungry, cold, and poorly dressed, I wander for a time. I smile and say, it is only for a time. I will rejoice tomorrow, because good fortune is coming my way. God is my Father. He possesses immeasurable wealth. His wealth is mine. Health, happiness, and gold. If you have made fatal mistakes for which you have been excluded from society, if you morbidly dwell on an unfortunate experience, making it increasingly large, dark, and horrible, simply push it out of your mind, bury it, forget it. Tell it, "You have no power over me. I will not allow you to destroy my peace and frustrate my career. You are not the truth of my being. My reality is divine, and you cannot touch it. I can, and I will rise above all my problems. I will repair all my mistakes and faults. From now on, I will work with the God who is in me. I will not be defeated. I will surpass myself." If you are enslaved by a demonic habit that has ruined your hopes, marred your happiness, frustrated your ambition, and cast its dark veil over your life, tell yourself that you will break this bad habit and be free, not a slave. If it is impurity, say, "No, I was not made to be dominated by such a monstrous vice. The image of God in me was not meant to wallow in this filth. I have already suffered enough from this cursed habit that undermines my health, kills my chances of success in life, and degrades my being. I am a child of the infinite, sent here to make a worthy contribution to humanity, to do good. I will do good. I will free myself from this vile habit and regain my self-esteem no matter what. I will be a man, not a thing, a child of God, not a beast." Continuously root your mind with thoughts and affirmations of purity that will neutralize your sensual desires. Repeat again and again your determination not to let your life be ruined by restrained passions. Make a vigorous and energetic appeal to your best self. Make this request so attractive that your higher nature will awaken and dominate your actions. Say, "The Creator has commanded me to look upwards, not downwards. He made me to ascend, not to descend and wallow in the mire of animalism." If it's alcohol, opium, tobacco excess, or any other vice that steals your manhood and holds you back in life, engrave this affirmation into your rosary. "I was not made to be dominated by you, mere herb, grain extract, habit I have forged. I am done with you once and for all. The craving for you is destroyed. There is something divine in me that makes me perfectly capable of overcoming you. You are a vile thing, and you have dishonored me for the last time. Never again will you humiliate me and make me despise myself. There can be only one ruler in my mental kingdom, and I intend to be that ruler. I will not allow your whiskey, cigarette, opium, or any other drug or demon to ruin my life, or force me to bear the marks of my defeat, the scarlet letter of my degradation and failure. You have humiliated, insulted, and tyrannized me enough by making me admit that I lacked the willpower to face even one degrading vice. Now I challenge you. Your power over me is over. The spell is broken. From now on, I will walk this earth as a conqueror, a victor, not as a slave. I will face the world with my head held high and my gaze straight ahead. God and I are the majority. There is no inferiority or depravity in the man that God created. No matter how low you have fallen, the image of God in you can never be sullied or depraved. It is as perfect in the worst criminal in prison as it is in the greatest saint. There is something in every human being that is immaculate, something that never falls ill, never sins. It is the God within us, and it is where the very hope of the most brutal man on earth resides. There is something divine in him, sinless, immortal, the God within him who will come to his aid instantly when called upon. If you feel that you have strayed from your God, that you have turned away from the current leading to heaven, simply repeat things to yourself like, "Nearer, my God, to thee." This will help you realign your mast, making your connection with the divine cable that carries omnipotent power. The feeling of separation will fade, and the burden under which you previously wavered will become lighter, lifting away from you. The secret of all health, prosperity, happiness, power, and love in a victorious life lies in a consciousness of union, unity with the divine. This is the secret to all human blessings. When you are in this current towards God, you are closer to God and cannot fear, for you know that no harm can reach the infinite power. The closer we get to divinity, the greater our strength and effectiveness will be. What makes us weak and ineffective is that we have extinguished this power through our erroneous thinking, through our vicious living. Your life will gain new meaning, a more divine dignity, when you consciously become aware of your union with the great creative and sustaining principle of the universe. Nothing will help you achieve this great result more than the daily and constant use of your new thought rosary. This will allow you to increasingly distance yourself from the things that make you weak, that make you think you are a mere puppet at the mercy of a cruel fate, that casts you into the world without regard for your own birthright, desires, and will. You can turn each bead into a prayer and affirmation that brings you closer to the source of all things, whether overcoming a vicious habit, strengthening a flaw or deficiency, dispelling poverty and despair, or whatever you desire. You can repeat your affirmations silently if you are with others, audibly when you are alone, until it becomes part of you. Especially repeat the beads of your rosary that best address your most urgent needs before retiring for the night. If you have demagnetized yourself, neutralizing your hopes, ambition, and efforts with your dark and vitiated view of life, with your doubts and anxieties, your fear of poverty, disease, misfortune, and death, remove these things from your mind and say, God is my help, God is my provision, nothing can be lacking. God is my shepherd, I shall not want. I must live in full realization of my unity with infinite life. Each of us is a part of the living God, and we are powerful, victorious, and happy exactly to the extent that we realize our unity with Him. We are weak, abject, and miserable to the extent that we separate ourselves from Him, the source and provider of all. The attraction to the house of the poor, as long as we maintain the thought of the house of the poor, leads us towards the house of the poor. A mean and miserly thought means a mean and miserly response, no matter how hard one works. If one constantly harbors the ideal of poverty, that thought drives as much away as it pursues. The person who sows thoughts of failure or poverty cannot reap success or prosperity, any more than a farmer can harvest wheat by sowing thistles. Poverty is a mental disease. Someone has said that no one ever fell into vice without first attracting it through their mental attitude. Extended observation and study of the matter have convinced me that generally, people who make their lives a miserable failure expect it. They have a morbid fear of poorhouses, living in such dread of lack that they close off the very source of their supply. They have so distorted their minds that they cannot see beyond poverty. They have wasted precious energy that could have been used to build happiness and prosperity by fearing and preparing for the terrible things that might happen to them. And according to the law, they have received what they feared. Thinking about war, talking about it, anticipating it, preparing for it, in other words, preparing for perpetual war, greatly contributed to the outbreak of the greatest war in history. If in all the nations involved, people had talked about peace, thought about peace, hoped for peace, and prepared for it, there would have been peace on earth. Similarly, as long as people talk about poverty, think about it, expect it, and prepare for it, they will have poverty. Preparing for poverty, expecting it, attracting it, confirms the conditions of poverty. We constantly attract to ourselves what we anticipate. If we continuously emit a current of thought of poverty, a current of debt, a current of discouragement, no matter how much we work in the opposite direction, we will never move away from the current we have set in motion. The type of thought current we generate will come back to us. Everywhere we see people striving to make progress, working hard from morning till night to improve their condition, but who never hope to prosper because they believe they will only get what they work for. A typical example of those who remain in the current of poverty is a woman I know who constantly asserts her inability to improve her condition. She responds to her wealthier friends who tell her she should have this or that by saying, "It's all well and good for you rich people to say that, but those things are not for me. We have always been poor, and I suppose we always will be. We can only have the basic necessities of life, and we are lucky to have them. Of course, I could afford a little indulgence for myself and the children from time to time, but that would be extravagant. I must save for rainy days." Now, I have nothing against people saving for rainy days. It's part of prudence to be prepared for all emergencies. It's a wonderful thing to save, to spend, to enjoy our later years. But people who start early to plan for rainy days and deny themselves every little pleasure and enjoyment to increase that provision fall into the habit of deprivation, and normally they continue their whole lives. This woman limits her supply by her belief that every penny she can save must go into the rainy day fund, because she will always be poor. She assures herself and others that she will never have the things she would like to have because of her poverty, and thus she starves her life and her children's lives by anticipating a possible shortage. She is an example among many men and women who settle for their poverty, half reconcile themselves with their limitations, and make no sincere effort to overcome them. In other words, they never dream of exercising their positive creative thought, but continue to live and realize their conditions of negative, destructive, and poverty-stricken thinking. These are people who always say they cannot afford certain things, that they cannot afford to send their child to school or college this year, that they cannot afford necessary clothing or vacations due to the rainy day that looms like a specter at every holiday, every occasion when they try to find a little pleasure or satisfaction in the present. They always postpone things to the next year, but that next year never arrives. The children never go to school or college, and they themselves never take the needed vacations, the trip to the neighboring country, or the long-promised journey abroad. They eternally postpone enjoying the good things in life until they can afford them. And that moment never comes for people of this fearful mentality, because they always want to accumulate a little more for the future. I know a number of elderly people who always tighten their belts not only for luxuries, but even for the necessities of life, in anticipation of a possible rainy day they are always planning for. They make life a long and continuous rainy day, not realizing that they often tend to create the need for which they are eternally saving. Sometimes we read in the newspapers striking illustrations of the results of this famished and miserly mental habit. Recently, a New York newspaper reported a typical case, that of an old woman who died alone in the slums of the metropolis. Her body was discovered several days after her death, and her surroundings were so miserable that initially it was thought she had no money. However, when an investigation was conducted, it was discovered that the woman had nearly $10,000 in cash and bank deposits. Destitute due to her sick mind, this poor creature, like many other souls afflicted by poverty, died of hunger amid plenty. Her mind was so obsessed with the thought of poverty that she had denied herself even the basic necessities of life for years. She had isolated herself from the great current of life flowing around her to hoard, hoard, and hoard. She did not allow anyone into her rooms, and she died alone and neglected, leaving behind the money that could have made her comfortable, happy, and useful, and extended her life. She was as much a victim of the disease of poverty as if she had not had a penny. The children of Israel, when crossing the desert, constantly meditated on the thought of poverty. Maybe God can give us a table in the wilderness. Of course not. That is not reasonable. We will starve if we do not return to Egypt. Had it not been for the faith of their great leader Moses in the power guiding them, they would have returned to Egypt, to the slavery and poverty they had heard about. Even after the manna was given to them fresh each day for a long time, they did not believe the provision would continue. They were still skeptical and tried to store enough manna for rainy days, but it did not keep, and they had to rely on a new supply each day. But where will our provision come from? How will we pay the rent, the mortgage, the farm? Where will the money come from? What will happen if we cannot find it? Where will the clothes for the children come from? How will we obtain the necessities of life? Where does our provision come from? Why can't we get a job that really allows us to live? These are the questions a multitude of people around the world ask, expressing the acute pain of the disease of poverty so evident in all civilized countries. Nothing else causes humans as much anxiety. Nothing else is as perpetually irritating as this fear of what will come in the future, this dread of poverty, of not being able to meet the needs, the comforts of our loved ones, the fear of not being able to sustain ourselves and raise our children in comfort and respectability. This demagnetizes us, drives away the things we want, and attracts to us those that we have. Job said, "What I feared has come upon me." People who have an abnormal fear of poverty attract the same condition they fear and try to avoid, because the mind connects to what it thinks about. Our doubts, our hatreds, and our fears, what we connect with, we attract. Everything you allow to remain in your mind, you unconsciously create. If you continuously think about misfortunes, poverty, if you fear failing in your work, lacking resources, if you are constantly worried about the possibility of your business declining, if you dread losing control of your trade or profession, you exacerbate your problem and make it worse. There are a multitude of people who do not even expect to be comfortable, much less to possess luxuries. They anticipate hard times and do not realize that this very anticipation increases their magnetic power to attract what they do not want. Not long ago, a very depressed young man who could not make headway in life asked me what I thought the problem was. He told me that he had always worked hard but seemed not to progress. All he could do was barely make a living. Everything seemed to be going against him. Fate seemed determined to keep him down, no matter how hard he struggled against it. He felt doomed to be poor, to be a failure. He believed that bad luck, poverty, and failure were part of his genes, since his father and grandfather, he said, were also very hard-working but had never managed to succeed, never got out of poverty, and he did not expect to either. Another older man, who also sought my advice for a similar difficulty, lamented the injustice of human conditions and cursed his fate. "I work early in the morning and late at night, even on Sundays and holidays," he said. "I haven't taken a vacation in years. I have struggled, toiled, and pushed to make my place in the world since I was a child, and yet past 50, I have still achieved nothing. There is something wrong somewhere in society when this persistence and constant effort still do not allow one to get anywhere, to rise to a level that is worthwhile." I asked him about his training and initial education. He admitted that he had not prepared much for his life's work, as he believed his father had also been a hard worker. He had always tried to improve his condition, but like him, he had never succeeded. He concluded that success was not in the family and that there was no point in spending years preparing for a career since it would not bring much anyway. These two men are examples of individuals who constantly direct their minds toward poverty and failure, and then complain when they get what they have unintentionally invited through the law of mental attraction. They could only obtain poverty and failure. Each had wished for success and prosperity but always anticipated the opposite. They had worked like slaves, striving aimlessly, underestimating both themselves and their talents, believing that their only ability was to do their best, and that if success occurred by chance, it would be a stroke of luck rather than an inherent right. No man can become prosperous as long as he maintains in his mind the image of limitation, lack, and need. In this world, we do not obtain things we do not believe we can get. We do not accomplish what we doubt we can do, even if we have the ability. At university, I met a boy who was always certain he would fail his exams, and who invariably did. However, this was more due to his fear, his terror of failure, than to any lack of ability or preparation in his studies. He had developed the habit of anticipating failure, predicting misfortunes, seeking them out, and preparing for them, and this followed him throughout his life. In all communities, in all occupations and professions, there are capable and conscientious men and women who work hard in their actual work to succeed in the world, but they do not expect to succeed. It is lamentable to see them working day after day, but always looking in the wrong direction. They work for success in their vocations, they work for a competency for themselves and their families, but all the while they expect failure, anticipate poverty, and live in an atmosphere of mental scarcity. There is no philosophical law that can produce exactly the opposite of what you have in your mind, on what you focus on. If you think negatively, if you are fearful, if you are worried, if you have fears and doubts, if you continue to visualize, think, and talk about hard times, panics, and financial crises, your business will contract and wither. On the other hand, if you have confidence, if you expect better things, if you are convinced that conditions will improve, you will set in motion a current of thought that will support your efforts with irresistible force. But a current of thought saturated with fear of failure, doubts, and discouragement will neutralize your most strenuous efforts. Instead of starting their careers actively, with a victorious attitude, with the idea that their careers should be a triumph, many, if not most young people start with the impression that they are not cut out for victory. This is due to the fact that they have lived in an environment of failure and have absorbed the idea of poverty. They were raised with the fear of failure in their minds, a fear of poverty, a terror of lack. Write in your heart that the benefactor who planned a universe filled with good things for our use and enjoyment never intended for us to starve or be miserable. If we do not succeed, if we are unhappy, it is because of our attitude toward God and life. Most of us adopt the position of beggars rather than that of children of an all-powerful Father, and we remain beggars until the end. One of the worst things about being very poor is the danger of becoming accustomed to poverty, of expecting it, of being convinced that we will always be poor with no hope of help. The habit of thinking that we must remain poor because we are is a paralyzing habit. Everything we have become accustomed to over time tends to become a fixed way of life. Multitudes of people have become so accustomed to their environment of poverty, so used to taking it for granted that they will remain poor, that they do not take the necessary steps to escape poverty, and they do not even realize that the first step must be mental. Instead, they constantly affirm their poverty, sinking deeper into this condition through their thoughts and beliefs. The early years of many children are saturated with the suggestion of poverty. They breathe an atmosphere of poverty, constantly hear about poverty, and acquire a vocabulary of poverty. Their parents are always talking about poverty, complaining about their harsh conditions, lamenting being born poor and having to die poor. Children raised in this mental environment develop a kind of inclination towards poverty that is very difficult to shed. The orientation towards poverty and despair, towards despair and failure, is the worst aspect of poverty. The fixation of their belief that they cannot escape poverty, their resignation to it, their firm belief that they will never attain prosperity, are the most distressing aspects of the very poor. There is a huge difference between the outlook, mental attitude, and facial expression of a poor farm boy who dreams of the day he can go to university, who imagines himself there, who wholeheartedly believes that his dreams will come true, and the outlook, mental attitude, and face of another boy in a similar situation who also desires an education but has abandoned all hope of ever going to university or escaping the monotony and hard labor of the farm, who despises. We must change our thinking before we can change our conditions. Thought always leads forward in any achievement. It would be just as impossible for the great mass of poor people to improve their material position as long as they maintain their current mental attitude. The persistent belief that they will always be poor and that they will never be able to do what others have done to escape is as detrimental as for the boy who dreams of going to university, but has convinced himself that higher education is impossible. As long as they think that everyone else is lucky and they are unlucky, as long as they continue to talk about their hard fate and think that the rich are grabbing all the good things in the world while they only get crumbs, and will never achieve anything else, of course, they will never achieve anything else. Most poor people have the same attitude toward poverty as chronically ill people have toward health. Chronically ill individuals never expect to be truly healthy. They always anticipate the development of an illness, seek symptoms imagining they will have this or that physical ailment or disease. The way to have health is to think about it, to expect it, to visualize it, to realize that health is a positive and imperishable fact, and that illness is only the negation, the absence of health, largely due to a poor mental attitude, to poisoning one's own thought by disobeying the laws of health. If we want to be healthy, we must have vigorous, robust, joyful, and healthy thoughts, and we must observe the laws of health. We will have the same degree of health as we give to our mental model of health. It is our visualization of health that brings about the expected condition. The same applies to poverty. Recently, a poor man told me that he would be perfectly satisfied if he could be assured of never having to go to the poorhouse, that he would have enough to meet the basic needs of his small family. He said he never hoped for better. He was convinced he was not destined for luxury. He had always been poor and always expected to be so. This is precisely what kept this man poor, as he was a hard worker, but always expected to be poor, hoping for nothing better, content to work to meet the basic needs of life, and of course, he barely managed to live, earning barely enough to survive. This attitude of the poor towards poverty tends to increase it, to engrave their sickness. As long as one maintains the thought of poverty, it becomes a magnet for poverty and continually attracts unhappy conditions to oneself. We have a good example of this, a true objective lesson in the elderly men who are seeking work everywhere. I have observed these desperate men in their rounds searching for a job. Their appearance reflects poverty, their expression conveys absolute despair. They seem like men whose bank accounts are empty, men who have reached the age where returns diminish and feel exactly as they appear. Their appearance reflects their thought. Their clothing, manners, walk, the look in their eyes, all express a mental attitude that points downward. If these men prepared themselves, shaved and dressed properly before seeking work, there would be hope for them. Even if they cannot afford new clothes, they can brush the old ones, polish their shoes, take a bath and shave, and above all, do a mental clean-up. Their chances will be 10 times better compared to those they had before this physical and mental purification. Before securing a job, a man must exude self-confidence and expectations of success. He must demonstrate that he has reserves, good work abilities, and potential for success. Otherwise, no one will want him. A man who approaches an employer with a discouraged attitude, begging for a job and arguing that he desperately needs it, complaining about the difficulty of finding work, will not succeed. If you are trapped in poverty so extreme that it even steals your desire to escape, you are cursed by the poisoning of your own thought. This is what ruins and makes so many lives bitter, pushing away happiness, health, and prosperity. Poverty is often a disease. It is as unnatural for humans as any physical illness like smallpox or tuberculosis. Similarly, failure, fear, worry, and anxiety are mental diseases from which few people seem to escape. But gradually, we find an antidote to these viruses, diseases that are so fatal to effectiveness, health, happiness, and prosperity. The Bible tells us that the destruction of the poor is their poverty. Any investigation into life in the slums of our large cities, any record of the lives of unfortunate poor in our environment, demonstrates that this is an absolute truth. Extreme poverty is a scourge that drags its victims from the depths to the lowest, making life a bitter struggle for the meager crumbs that keep body and soul together. When these are not obtained, it drives the weak and desperate to crime to avoid starving. Or if he is too proud to steal, beg, or go to the poorhouse, he ends his life rather than wait for the slow and cruel process of starvation to overtake him. Each year, poverty claims tens of thousands of victims, including small children who die from disease and neglect in damp, dirty basements where the sun never enters. It drags them into mills and factories where, deprived of their childhood rights, they become twisted, bitter, dissatisfied, and warped men and women, filled with unfulfilled ambitions and desires. It drives crowds towards crime, madness, and death. In summary, poverty is responsible for more ignorance and crime, more dissatisfaction and misery, more suicides and ruined ambitions, more shattered hopes and destroyed homes than almost anything else. Indeed, the destruction of the poor is their poverty. If we want to progress as a race, as a civilization, we must emphatically eradicate this crushing disease of poverty among us. Instead of praising its blessings as some do, it is our duty to distance ourselves from it and help others to do the same. The disease of poverty, the curse of poverty, is not a decree of providence. It is largely the result of ignorance. All humans on this earth could live comfortably if they knew the powers locked within themselves and were willing to work and make the best use of them. If the antidotes to poverty were as well known as the antidotes to poison, there would be no poor people. Humans as a whole are in a very similar situation regarding the antitoxin of poverty as the medical profession is with the recently discovered antitoxin for a terrible disease. Doctors do not yet know how to apply it safely and effectively, and until practice establishes its great value, its use will be limited. When knowledge and use of the remedy for poverty become widespread, the disease will be conquered as the race becomes more intelligent and better educated. We are eliminating a multitude of conditions that people once thought were born with and from which there was no escape. Many ills that have been conquered by science and education were once considered plagues sent by God to punish us for our sins, to correct us. Diseases that 100 years ago terrorized the hearts of people and before which they fled in horror are no longer feared at all today. Intelligence and science have conquered the great epidemics that in the Middle Ages and dark times carried away their victims by the millions. Today, we no longer have these plagues because we have eliminated their causes. We now know that preventing these terrible epidemics is simply a matter of sanitation, scientific hygiene, and intelligent, healthy living. We know that these are plagues forged by ignorance and not judgments from God. It is not reasonable to believe that after defeating these foolish enemies of the race through intelligent thought and scientific methods, we cannot overcome them all through similar means. Poverty is a scourge, a mental disease that can be conquered through intelligent scientific methods. We know its causes and can eliminate them, as they are largely mental. It is not necessary to call a doctor to treat the disease of poverty. The patient can be his own doctor. He can heal himself. To this end, we recommend listening to the next chapter, How to Become a Magnet for Prosperity. Cultivation is the most important business in life. The habit of claiming as your own, as a lived and present reality, what you desire with all your heart is a magnetic power that attracts the things we covet. The more we persistently nurture the thought of prosperity, the more we will strengthen and intensify it, increasing its power to attract prosperity. Thinking about abundance, visualizing prosperity opens the mind and establishes thought currents toward a greater supply. We are made in such a way that everything we obtain in life reflects what first emanates from us. Every thought you send out will attract a corresponding reality in the material world. Every human being is a magnet whose power of attraction can be developed in any desired direction. Anyone can direct this power to attract what they wish. Before your life can be truly effective, you must become a magnet for the things that will make it so. You must learn to attract everything that will help you succeed in your work, everything that will allow you to achieve your ambitions. If poverty is holding you back, you can overcome it by becoming a magnet for prosperity. We live in the midst of an inexhaustible supply. It is your fault if you do not draw from this stream what you need. What we obtain in life, we obtain through the law of attraction. Like attracts like. What you have managed to gather in this world you attracted by your mentality. You may say you earned these things, that you bought them with your salary. The fruit of effort is real, but your thought preceded your effort. Your mental plan preceded your success. The simple change in your mental attitude will soon begin to change conditions. Your decision to look toward prosperity in the future, to cultivate it, to become a magnet for it, will tend to attract the things that will satisfy your ambition. The text says that the generous eye will be blessed. This is the expression of a fundamental truth. The images you create in the eye of your mind, the thoughts you nurture, build your external conditions day after day. These are real forces working tirelessly in the invisible. The more you think and visualize favorable conditions, the more you increase your power to realize them. You become a magnet for what you desire. It is a psychological law. If you want to become a magnet for prosperity, you must not only think about prosperity, but also resolutely turn your back on poverty. Start thinking today. Do not wait until tomorrow or the next day. If you do not see yourself as prosperous, assume a prosperous appearance. Dress as much as possible like a prosperous person, walk like one, act like one, think in terms of prosperity. A mental healer could not cure cancer by holding an image of that horrible disease with all its dreadful symptoms in his mind. You must eliminate all of that from your mind. You must see your patient whole, clean, healthy, as God intended, free of disease. You must picture the ideal man and declare his divinity. The same applies to healing from poverty. You cannot do it while maintaining conditions of poverty in your mind. If you want to be prosperous, you must nurture the thought of prosperity, the image of prosperity in your mind. You must refuse to see or acknowledge poverty. Do not recognize it in yourself. Erase all signs of it, not only from your mental attitude, but as much as possible from your appearance. Even if at first you cannot wear fine clothes or live in a fine house, you can radiate hope and the expectation of the glorious inheritance that is your birthright, and everything around you will reflect that light. Prosperity begins in the mind. You must lay your foundations in your thoughts, surrounding yourself with an atmosphere of prosperity. In other words, you will build in your environment, in your life, what resides in your mind. We hear some people say that they are always lucky, that everything seems to go well for them. Things happen to them because there are invisible mental forces radiating from their minds toward the goals they have set. Things align and come to us based on the strength and speed of the thought forces we project. Thinking about better things could be considered the first aid for the poor. Imagining yourself prosperous, living in a comfortable home, wearing good clothes, surrounded by the refinements of life, able to do your best work in service to humanity, is entering the current that leads to success. It is strange that most of us believe the Creator will help us in everything except our financial problems. It seems that we think asking for money to meet our needs is somehow sacrilegious. We may ask for comfort, that He soothe our afflictions, calm our sorrows, and heal our diseases, but to implore God to help us pay the rent, settle the mortgage, or cover the expenses of the farm does not seem quite right. Yet we know perfectly well that every bite of food we eat, the material for the clothes we wear, for the houses we live in, every breath we take must come from that infinite divine source. If the sun were to be erased or stopped sending its magical rays to Earth within a few days, there would not be a single living creature on Earth. No human being, no animal could exist without it. No tree, no plant, no flower, no fruit, no greenery would be possible without the sun's energy. All life would cease on this planet. It would be as cold, barren, and lifeless as the moon. The Creator is the builder and provider of the universe. Everything we have comes from Him, and without the supply flowing from His abundance, we could not live a single moment. So why should we not look to this great source for our financial supply? The truth is that we are all destined to have an abundant life. The Creator never intended for His children to crawl in poverty, to spend their lives in monotony and uncertainty. You are entitled to your inheritance of all that is good and beautiful, everything necessary for your well-being. We were not meant to live the lives of starving and emaciated paupers. It is our own fault if we do. The door to opulence is open to every human being born into this world, and no one but themselves can close that door. No human being can close the door to the humblest of children, born of their divine inheritance. The only real poverty is in the mind, and no one but oneself can control their mind. Do not nourish or tolerate even for a moment the idea that anything other than prosperity can reach you, for this idea is your birthright, and because it is your right, you must claim it. Instead of admitting poverty, tell yourself, I am amidst abundance. I lack nothing that I need because my Father is the infinite source. Turn your back on poverty. Decide to have nothing to do with it, and not to nurture it by insisting on and visualizing suggestions of poverty. Face prosperity. Think and plan in conditions of prosperity. Strive for prosperity with all your might, and you will attract it to yourself. Suppose you are poor and live in a modest home. Simply sit down with your wife and children and decide to focus on your goal of improving conditions, to look towards prosperity rather than poverty. Tell yourself, it is shameful that the children of God should appear so impoverished. It is a reflection of my Father, God. By walking among my fellows with an appearance as if everything had gone wrong for me, as if I am disappointed with life, is ungrateful. At least I can show gratitude for health, for the privilege of living in the pure air and sunlight of God. By holding my head high and walking proudly as one should, as a true son should. I am truly insulting the Creator, to whom I pray by reflecting such desolation and degrading poverty in my mental attitude, thus erasing the divine image from my face. No matter what I have, I can at least appear respectable. I can show that I respect myself by eliminating as much as possible the depressing appearance and influence of poverty. Arrange your home and make it as clean and cheerful as possible. Do the same with your clothing and overall appearance. Keep yourself well dressed, look up, stand straight, brush yourself off. Make an effort. Surround yourself with an atmosphere of hope and show the world through the new light in your eyes, the light of hope and expectation for better things, that there is a change in you. Your neighbors will notice, they will see a change in your home, your wife, and your children. The change in your mental attitude and that of your family, looking towards the light instead of the darkness, towards hope instead of despair, will do immense good. Your entire perspective on life changes. You become a magnet for prosperity, radiating waves of thought of hope, ambition, and determination. Your new mental attitude manifests in an upright and vigorous posture, in squared and straightened shoulders, in a clean and neat appearance, even if the clothes are old and worn, in a winning, energetic, and magnetic face. In this way, you establish the conditions for success. Positive thinking about prosperity flows like an invisible current and connects like similar thought currents. Maintain the conviction of prosperity, work steadfastly towards your goal, see opportunity and success before you. Decide to become someone, firmly hold the resolution, and your mentality will direct the invisible aspects of your personality to rise higher and higher, to attract others who will help you in the direction you are taking. If you want a better position, a higher salary, money to pay debts, or obtain what you need, whatever your goal, cling with all your mental strength to what you are trying to achieve, and do not doubt for a moment that you will succeed. Poverty and lack are not inherited. They have nothing to do with the children of God. Your inheritance is divine, grand, sublime. Poverty is a mental disease, and you carry the antidote against its poison in your mind. You owe it to the one who gave you life, health, and a brain to make something of yourself, to improve your situation. As long as you remain steeped in the conviction of poverty, you will not escape it. You must think of getting out. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Hold this thought firmly in your mind. Believe it. Live in accordance with it. Abundance can never flow through thoughts of poverty or doubt, just as clear and crystalline water cannot flow freely through pipes clogged with grease. A correct viewpoint must be your mental plumber to keep the connection open and free. Like attracts like. Thoughts of poverty attract more poverty. Thoughts of fear attract more fear. Thoughts of worry attract more worry. Thoughts of anxiety attract more anxiety. Conversely, thoughts of faith, confidence, and security attract similar things. Poverty is a disease that can only be cured with remedies of prosperity. Prosperity thinking is the natural antidote for the germ of poverty. It destroys it. Poverty thinking cannot coexist in the mind with prosperity thinking. One will expel the other. It is up to you which type of thought you will nourish and encourage. Hold on to the awareness of your unity with the source of all provision. Always keep open the supply lines between you and the infinite source of all good. Do not pinch them shut. Do not cut off the supply with limiting thoughts of poverty, thoughts of doubt, thoughts of fear, thoughts of worry. Keep your supply lines open with great faith in your Father, Mother God, who is more solicitous for your well-being than any human father could be. Cling to the anchor of your union with the infinite life. Stay in the current that flows towards God, and your life will not be dried up or ruined by the drought of poverty. The problem with us is that we have become accustomed to seeking material provision when our primary provision should be mental. We maintain or close the supply pathways with our thoughts and convictions. We materialize poverty with our hesitant thoughts, with our fear of it. We are beginning to discover that what we receive from this world is what we think and work towards, that our thought plan precedes its material realization, just as the architect's plan precedes the construction. Remember that prosperity cannot flow into your life as long as your mind is filled with thoughts and beliefs of poverty. We move in the direction of our thoughts and convictions. According to no law can you hope to obtain what you do not believe you can get. Prosperity cannot come to you if you are constantly repelling it with your thoughts of poverty. You must think positively and determinedly that you will succeed in everything you want to do or be. Before you can hope for success, it is the first condition to become a magnet for what you pursue, whether it is a job, money, a better position, health, or anything else. Your thoughts on this matter must be positive, clear, decisive, and persistent. No weak and wavering thoughts such as, maybe I will get it, maybe someday, I wonder if I can do it, will help you achieve anything in this world. In the following case, when young John Wanamaker set out with a cart to make his first sale of clothing, positive energy ignited towards becoming a prince of commerce. Passing by the large clothing stores, he imagined himself as a great merchant, owner of an establishment far larger than those he saw, and he did not neutralize or weaken this wave of thoughts with doubts or fears about reaching his ambitious goal. Most people try too hard to force their advancement, not realizing that they can, through the power of thought, become magnets attracting what will help them progress. Wanamaker thus attracted the forces that make a prince of commerce. Every step he took was a step forward in aligning his vision of progress with his reality. Marshall mentally projected himself from a small country shop to an office position in Chicago. Then he thought and worked to move out of that office and become a partner. Always thinking and aiming higher, he visualized himself at the head of the largest commercial establishment in America, or even the world. His mind was always ahead, always imagining a little more, a little further, continually visualizing a larger business, thus becoming a magnet for the things he sought. And Wanamaker could have been satisfied with himself at the beginning, staying in his small shop in Philadelphia. That would have cut off any possibility of him becoming one of the greatest merchants the world has ever known. If Marshall had stopped seeing himself higher, when the man he worked for in the small pitbull shop predicted he would never succeed as a merchant, he would never have made a name for himself. But the fact that Deacon Davis, Marshall's father, told him that the boy would never become a salesman even in 1,000 years did not prevent him from seeing himself in Chicago, the city of opportunities. He told himself, and kept climbing until the small country merchant who predicted his failure was nothing more than a dwarf in comparison. The story of each of these men, with regard to the principle of success, is the story of all men who have succeeded in their ventures. They might not have been aware of the underlying law in their methods, but they worked in harmony with it, which is why they succeeded. This is also true for Andrew Carnegie and all the millionaires and self-made men who went from poor childhood to owning colossal fortunes or holding leadership positions in various fields of global business. Anyone who makes accumulating a fortune their primary goal, and who possesses the courage, determination, will, and enough faith in themselves to persevere along this path, will achieve it. But well before the young man reaches such a goal, he will have diminished his virility and withered his soul. Moving away from poverty is one thing. Setting one's heart on money as the supreme good is another. There is a world of difference between saturating your mind with thoughts about money and its acquisition, to the point where there is no room for any other aspiration, and constantly insisting on the dark and desperate thought of poverty, the incessant image of oneself as impoverished, until one is convinced of the domination of poverty over oneself, which inhibits even the ability to move away from it. People who are economically distressed also face mental struggles, suffering from a mental illness of discouragement and hopelessness. There should be institutions run by government experts for the treatment of these poor individuals, as they need it just as much as patients in our hospitals need expert mental counseling. They have lost their way on the path of life and need to be shown the way back. Their mentality must be changed so that they face the light instead of the darkness, showing them that they are blocking their prosperity channels by cutting off their supply through their narrow and limiting thoughts. Their entire mental attitude tends toward failure and poverty, and by a natural law, their external conditions conform to their mental images. This disease of poverty could be cured for most of the marginalized and failed individuals through appropriate mental treatments. If it could be shown to people among today's many failures that as long as they maintain thoughts of poverty and wear a sad and dejected face, as if there were no hope in their lives, they will remain poor. But if they simply turned around and looked towards the sun to leave their shadows behind, their conditions would begin to improve rapidly. They would gain new momentum in life and courage. These mental prosperity treatments would generate a new hope within them that would strengthen their entire being. What a revelation it would be for the poor around the world if they could eliminate from their minds, even just for a whole year, the thought of poverty. If they could erase from their minds all images of poverty and all suggestions of misery that sadden and discourage them. If, instead of expecting poverty and everything that this idea implies, they could spend a year expecting exactly the opposite, prosperity. By visualizing, talking about and thinking about prosperity, acting as if they expect to be prosperous. This simple radical change in thought, this shift in mental attitude, maintaining a prosperous outlook persistently for a year, would not only change their entire perspective on life, but revolutionize their material conditions. Their ambition would grow, and their new way of living would give an upward direction to their environment. No matter how poor they are, their shabby appearance would disappear, and everything would take on a different aspect. There would be a new light on people's faces, hope replacing despair. The hope for better days would give a glow of joy to their faces, a light in their eyes that has never existed before. Working with a spirit of hope and anticipation for better things, rather than with discouragement and fears of poverty, they would continue to advance in a way that would astonish them. The time is not far off when we will have prosperity practitioners specializing in teaching people how to clear their minds of thoughts that produce poverty, replacing them with their opposites, thereby continually expanding the mental power of attraction until the mind becomes a powerful magnet continuously attracting prosperity. These specialists will teach people the creative power of right thinking and show them how to attract their desires instead of repelling them, as so many others do with erroneous thinking. Future clergymen will greatly contribute to eradicating poverty among their people by instructing them to turn their backs on misery and look towards prosperity. They will teach them to attract the sunlight of prosperity to themselves. Physical healing occurs through the healing and restorative forces present within the individual. These are largely implemented through faith in the doctor, the remedy, the healer. The healthy mental attitude thus created overcomes illness. The healing of poverty is similar. The patient must first have faith in the great physician of the universe. Once this is established firmly and fully, there will be no difficulty in flooding the mind with thoughts of prosperity. The belief that our Father, Mother God is the author of abundance, the author of all wealth on earth, and that He is infinitely more loving and concerned for our well-being than the most affectionate mother is for her child. We have not yet tapped into the possibilities of all the resources of the world. Every inhabitant of the earth today walks on secrets that would free man from drudgery and allow him to live happily instead of merely existing miserably as he has done so far. Until now, in the vast majority of cases, we have barely existed on the surface of things. Now we are beginning to taste the core as we approach the knowledge of the powers that are locked within ourselves, as well as the unlimited supply of God's abundance. Here and there, people are mastering the law of opulence, demonstrating that they can overcome poverty by becoming magnets for prosperity, that is, by thinking and working according to the law of opulence and abundance. It is monstrous that so many children of God are starving right by the rivers where an inexhaustible flow of abundance, laden with all the riches of the universe, is flowing. There is no excuse for the horrible misery and suffering that exist among us. There is no reason for the children of the King of Kings to be tormented and tortured, led to premature death by poverty. For the Creator has produced enough wealth for all His children to provide them with abundance in everything they need. There is no need for those who have inherited all the good things of the earth to remain poor. The very structure of the human machine indicates that it was designed for the best, for comfort, for luxury, and not for conditions of poverty. If we could realize the enormous influence of always hoping for the best, of always expecting opulence and success, we would never allow ourselves to be dominated by the dark images of poverty and failure. If all those who suffer from the limitations and humiliations imposed by absolute poverty committed to establishing the habit of prosperity according to the suggested lines, by continually maintaining thoughts of prosperity, by convincing the subconscious that we are made for success, that prosperity belongs to us, we would soon see the millennium where we assert our divinity and claim our heritage, realizing that our origin keeps us in contact with the very source of all supply. When we realize that the children of God were never meant to be poor or suffer from hunger, that they were never supposed to live in conditions of misery, then we will discover the fundamental principle of prosperity. Maintain a victorious attitude towards life, and you will overcome all unfavorable conditions. The suggestion of inferiority, like the initials that children carve into the bark of a young tree, becomes large and ugly scars on an adult tree. The suggestions of inferiority carved into the minds of the young become large and ugly scars in the life of an adult. You can succeed when others do not believe in you, when everyone is denigrating you, but never when you do not believe in yourself. In the past, criminals on the run and slaves were marked. The words, "I am a fugitive," "I am a thief," and others indicated their crime or condition of inferiority, marked somewhere on their bodies with a red-hot iron. In Rome, thieves were branded on the forehead with a degrading letter. In Greece, Slaves were sometimes branded with a favorite poetic passage from their master. In France, the iron used to mark slaves, and criminals often took the form of a fleur-de-lis. In England, army deserters were marked with the letter D, and vagrants, thieves, and brawlers were marked in some way to announce their misfortune. The barbaric custom of marking human beings with the badge of crime or inferiority persisted in America even after it was abolished in the mother country. The work of Houston, The Scarlet Letter, gives us a vivid picture of the suffering inflicted on the moral transgressor by the moralistic Puritans during the colonial era. The tragic heroine Hester is never allowed to forget her sin. The grim scarlet letter that brands her proclaims her shame to everyone she meets for a long time. After the colonial period until their emancipation, slaves in Christian America were marked with the initials of their owners, just as in pagan Greece and Rome. The very idea of marking human beings with an indelible badge of misfortune and inferiority shocks us today. However, nowadays, we do not hesitate to mark people with the scarlet letter of illegality, the mark of prejudice. We place the criminal badge on our prisoners by shaving their heads and dressing them in stripes, thus perpetuating the idea that they are criminals, outlaws, a separate class. We even bring this mark into our homes to satisfy our cheap vanity, forcing our servants to wear a distinctive livery that reminds them they are servants, a degree lower than ourselves. Indeed, without these marked distinctions, the maid would often be mistaken for the mistress and the servant for the master, who far surpass them in appearance and character. There are certain inalienable rights that human beings inherit from their Creator, rights that no other human being, law, or authority is justified in taking away. Regardless of the offense a person might commit against society, we do not have the right to degrade them below the level of being human. We do not have the right to bombard them in a way that suggests their degradation and inferiority, to the point of making them almost certain to become less than human, reducing their self-esteem to such a degree that we even strip them of the power to try to regain their dignity and place in society. We do not have the right to insist that those who work for us wear a badge of inferiority. We do not have the right to introduce the idea of inferiority into the mind of any human being. One of the greatest wrongs we can inflict on anyone is to convince them that they are nobody, that they have no chances, and that they will never achieve anything. The suggestion of inferiority is responsible for more shattered ambitions, stunted lives, failures, misery, and unhappiness than any other cause. Just as a constant drip wears away a stone, the continuous repetition of an assertion leads to its acceptance by the average person, even if the facts are contrary. A constant suggestion presented to the mind impresses us despite ourselves and tends towards a conviction of its truth. When the weight of the Civil War heavily burdened Lincoln, when it was fashionable to denigrate, criticize, and condemn him, when the press worldwide caricatured him as a monstrous figure, one day while walking the corridors of the White House, he was heard saying, "Abe Lincoln, are you a dog or are you a man?" During these dark days, it sometimes seemed that Lincoln truly doubted being the man his closest friends knew or the man the antagonistic press imagined. The curse of the suggestion of inferiority not only tends to destroy our faith in ourselves, but often makes even the innocent appear guilty. When Lieutenant Dreyfus was wrongly convicted of treason in France due to a sordid conspiracy, he displayed outwardly all the signs of guilt. In the presence of a huge crowd in a public square in Paris, all his French army officer insignia were torn off, his epaulets and buttons cut from his uniform, and his sword was broken. Fully aware of his innocence regarding the crimes attributed to him, he appeared genuinely guilty of what he was accused of, and almost everyone among the vast crowd witnessing his public degradation believed that even his appearance corroborated his guilt. The unfortunate Dreyfus's mind was a wireless reception station for the hatred and contempt of millions, who thought they saw a vile traitor who had sold precious military secrets to Germany. We are all influenced, for better or for worse, by suggestion, but children and young people are particularly susceptible. Constant suggestions of stupidity, wickedness, and clumsiness from teachers or parents fill a child's mind with the idea that they are a dunce, that they are always making mistakes, that they are no good, and that they will never amount to anything. All of this leaves an indelible impression on their malleable minds. Children naturally admire their parents and teachers, which is why they take what they say as true. They have implicit faith in their superior knowledge and experiences, which they find wonderful. And when they are told they are stupid, clumsy, slow, or mean, they take what is said for granted, imagining that they must indeed be a fool and that their accusers are right in thinking they are no good and will never achieve anything. It is inconceivable for a parent or teacher to accuse a child of being boring, stupid, or mean, to tell them that there is nothing good in them and that they will never become someone or accomplish anything in life. The effect on a sensitive child is disastrous. Thousands of boys and girls have been mentally stunted, their careers hampered, and in some cases, completely ruined due to these cruel suggestions of inferiority. I have known men who mocked their sons with what they called their invincibility and stupidity until the boys eventually believed they were partially idiotic and could do nothing on their own. Many of them never did because they were unable to overcome the inferiority complex their parents had instilled in them. I recall a rather pathetic case of a sensitive boy whose every small mistake brought an avalanche of abuse from his father. He was told he was not only half stupid, but also a fool, an imbecile, good for nothing. The little boy completely lost faith in himself and withdrew so much that he almost no longer dared to look people in the face. He could not be convinced to enter his house when there were visitors or guests. He would sneak off and hide in the shed or barn until they left. In fact, he became so withdrawn that he even avoided mingling with other children and neighbors he had known since childhood. The boy truly had a brilliant mind, and when the death of his father left him to his own resources, he managed through willpower and persistence to make an honorable place for himself in life. However, he was never able to completely rid himself of the early conviction of his inferiority, his perceived lack of ability compared to others. His entire subsequent life was affected by these harmful suggestions. Whenever he was asked to take on responsibility, to serve on a committee or board, to speak in public or to stand out in any way, these mental images of his uselessness rose before him like terrifying ghosts and seriously paralyzed his efforts. He always felt that there was a serious flaw within him and that he could never completely overcome his handicap. This defective and overwhelming self-image, instilled in him from childhood and youth, robbed him of much of the best that life has to offer, all the joy and happiness that come from the spontaneous and free expression of oneself, of all one's faculties. Children are affected by praise or blame just like animals. It is easy to crush the spirit of a dog by abusing and mistreating it, so that in a short time it will cower with its tail between its legs, appear guilty, and self-loathingly adopt all the characteristics of a beaten dog. Thoroughbred horse trainers say that when a horse has been beaten and mistreated repeatedly, it loses confidence in itself, its spirit is broken, and when it sees other horses rise to its level or even surpass it, it is likely to give up the race. The destruction of self-confidence has caused many young people with the latent qualities of thoroughbreds to fail in the great race of life. There are thousands of boys who do not develop quickly. Their brains are strong and capable, but they function slowly and are therefore wrongly judged and misunderstood by both parents and teachers. In other cases, the stupidity and clumsiness attributed to children are only appearances, often the result of excessive shyness and self-consciousness. Young people do not dare to assert themselves, especially in families where the parents' rule is strict and repressive. Children fear to speak loudly or express themselves. In any case, the suggestion of inferiority deepens this flaw until it becomes an obsession. Many of the tragedies of the pernicious system of image-based classification in our public schools and colleges are the result of a deep sense of inferiority. Each year, a significant number of public school students and academy and college students suffer nervous breakdowns, go mad, or commit suicide because they failed their exams. The disgust and humiliation due to the sense of inferiority suggested by their failure destabilize them. In most of these cases, the cause of failure is lack of confidence, not lack of ability. It may seem absurd, but it is actually true. If the suggestion of inferiority is powerful enough to drive young people to suicide, then surely the opposite, the suggestion of superiority, would multiply a young person's ability and perform miracles in their career. A child should never hear the slightest insinuation that they are somehow inferior. Their entire education should aim to develop faith, self-confidence, belief in their abilities, and their great potential. Just as a branch bends and tree leans, a child who is impressed during their tender, formative years with the idea of inferiority suffers from a malady that nothing in later years can compensate for. Many young employees, especially if they are sensitive, are irreparably affected by grumbling and blaming employers who constantly remind them of their faults, reprimand them for the slightest trivial mistake, and never give a word of praise or encouragement, even if their work is meritorious. Enthusiasm is the very soul of success, and one cannot be enthusiastic about one's work, one cannot be continually proud of it, if one is constantly told that they are not good, that they are indeed shamefully bad, that they should be ashamed of themselves and should give up if they cannot do better. This quest for faults and the constant suggestion of inferiority have ruined many lives. For example, a young writer often faces a serious setback in their early efforts due to harsh criticism, an unappealable condemnation of their first book by a critic, or the return of their initial manuscript with the dismissive suggestion from an editor that they have chosen the wrong vocation. The nature of critics, editors, and book reviewers has dissuaded many young writers from developing their talent. The fear of criticism or humiliation, of being called stupid, boring, or dull has ruined the careers of many talented young people from the very start. If a young person is of a sensitive nature, even if they truly possess great talent, such affronts often discourage them so much that they never have the confidence to try again. Similarly, many future clergy or orators have been discouraged by early failures and the humiliation of ridicule. In other words, unless a young person is made of very strong material and has a great deal of courage and indomitable audacity, the suggestion of inferiority, constant reprimands, and discouragement can seriously compromise their career. If instead of complaining and focusing on the minor faults and errors of those under their authority and prophesying their absolute failure and ruin, parents, teachers, employers, and others in positions of responsibility were to recognize and appreciate the praiseworthy qualities, there would be less misery and crime in the world, fewer failures and human shipwrecks. The perpetual insinuation of inferiority holds back more people from achieving their potential than almost anything else. In the Old World, in China, Japan, India, England, and other European countries, for example, who can measure the harm caused in the form of caste. Think of the magnificent men and women who have been held back all their lives, kept in servile positions because they were raised in the belief that once a servant, always a servant, and that because their parents were servants, they too should be. What splendid brains and fine personalities we see serving in hotels, restaurants, and private homes in Europe, often far superior to the owners themselves, imbued with the idea that the son must follow in the father's footsteps, even though they are infinitely superior in natural ability to those they serve. These men remain as servers, butlers, coaches, gardeners, or modest employees of some sort, regardless of their talents, shackled by the deeply rooted belief from generations past that the accident of birth has determined their position in life. They are convinced that the barriers established by heredity and the caste system, an outdated feudal system, are insurmountable. How deliciously satirical is Barrie's portrayal of this old-world condition in his work, The Admirable Crichton. How skillfully he depicts the cunning, resourceful butler Crichton, who, amid the urgent circumstances of a shipwreck, proves to be a natural leader, a man far above his noble master. When the yacht carrying the master and his family, Crichton and other servants, is shipwrecked, and they are stranded on a desert island in their desperate situation, the caste barriers are broken and master and servant exchange roles. Freed from an artificial environment where hereditary rank and wealth determine a person's status, nature imposes its will unmistakably, and by the tacit consent of all, Crichton becomes the leader due to the strength of his innate ability. He leads, others obey. However, when they are rescued by a pleasure boat and returned to England, the old conditions are immediately reinstated. Crichton, without a murmur or thought of change, returns to his former status as a servant, and everything continues as before. While Americans mock or severely criticize the snobbery of class distinctions in other countries, We are guilty of similar snobbery, especially concerning a segment of our fellow citizens of African descent. No matter how educated, capable, refined, or charming a person is, if they have even a drop of black blood, we mark them with the stigma of racial inferiority. I always feel sympathy for people of color, especially for the most educated and refined men and women of this class, who must suffer greatly from discrimination because of their color. They see that white people avoid them everywhere, refuse to sit next to them in public places, in churches, on trains, and in cars, wherever they can. In the South, they are not allowed to travel in the same cars as white people, and in other parts of the country. Although they can travel in regular day cars, they are not permitted to board Pullman cars, except as servers and porters. Our hotels, private schools, public places, and even many of our churches practice similar discrimination. Churches claim not to draw color lines, but through their behavior, most of them do so practically. In this country, where we claim that all men are born free and equal, blacks are shamefully placed at a disadvantage in every way. Whites constantly humiliate them by reminding them that they belong to an inferior race and must stay in their place according to the assessment of those born under more favorable conditions. This constant insinuation of inferiority has greatly contributed to keeping people of color at a distance, significantly increasing their sense of real or imagined inferiority and discouraging their efforts to become the equals of those who look down on them. We cannot prevent others' opinions of us from influencing us. They make us, by their nature, think more or less well of ourselves and our abilities. Our environment affects us similarly. We unconsciously assume the superiority or inferiority of our environment. Employees working in cheap and low-quality stores or factories are quickly marked everywhere by the inferiority due to the cheap methods of the establishments where they work and spend their days. If employees from a store like Tiffany's or Altman's, for example, mixed with those from some of the cheap and low-quality shops in New York, it would not take much discernment to distinguish the workers from the superior environment from those from the inferior one. Spending the best years of one's life selling cheap and low-quality goods inevitably leaves a mark on those who do it. Although we fight against it, we are unconsciously colored by the quality of our work. In making your life choices, avoid, as if it were poison, concerns of low quality and lacking prestige in your community. Steer clear of occupations that have a demoralizing tendency. Any suggestion of inferiority is contagious and helps to divert life from its possibilities. Any influence of our environment becomes a suggestion that becomes part of us. If we live with people who are unambitious, negligent, or of loose morality and low ideals, we tend to reflect their qualities. If we mix frequently with those who use vulgar and incorrect English, with people who do not care about their manners or their expression, these things will reappear in our own conversation and manners. If we read inferior quality books or associate with eternal losers, with people who disdain their work and their lives, our own standards will suffer as well. Whether the inferiority concerns manners, work, conversation, colleagues, or habits of thought, wherever it occurs, its tendency is to lower all standards and reduce the average level of achievement. We are all living, sensitive plates on which the examples, thoughts, and suggestions of others, our own thoughts and habits, our associations and our environment, are indelibly engraved. If only I could ingrain in the consciousness of every person aspiring to success in life that they cannot achieve it while being associated with inferiority and having low self-esteem. Stay away from both. Have nothing to do with them. If you are a victim of the suggestion of inferiority, reject that suggestion. Cast it out of your mind as the greatest enemy of your well-being. You can do whatever you believe you can do. If you have a cheap and diminished image of yourself in mind, if you doubt your effectiveness, you are chained. You are not free to express yourself. This erects a barrier between yourself and the power that is realized simply through mental recognition, or the feeling that you are weak and ineffective is contagious. Others perceive it, and their thoughts add to yours to undermine your self-confidence. No matter what others say or think about you, always maintain a high ideal of yourself, an image of your own effectiveness. Never allow yourself to doubt your ability to undertake what you set out to do. You cannot be inferior because you are made in the image and likeness of God, and you can, if you wish, make a masterpiece of your life as it is part of his plan that you do so. You have experienced the path of love. Love, like the sun, never sees the dark side of anything. To win a person's work, you must cultivate their goodwill, which is sweeter than the scent of roses. It is the possession of a benevolent, charitable, and altruistic nature, a disposition ready to do for others whatever is good within your power. A man from New York once saw a little girl carrying a disabled boy across the street. He offered to help, saying that the boy was too heavy for her. "Oh no," the girl quickly replied. "He's not heavy, he's my brother." Oh, the wonderful power of love that lightens all heavy burdens and smooths all difficult paths. What would humanity be without love, which softens the hardest work and makes selflessness a joy? It is the greatest force in the universe. Without its transformative power, we would still be primitive barbarians. Despite the loud cries of pessimists and skeptics against it, it continues to guide mankind upwards. Even though the dream of world peacemakers has been in vain and Europe is plunged into a merciless war, there are numerous signs of the reign of love. Its healing and merciful power operates even on the cruel battlefield. We see it animating the great army of Red Cross surgeons and nurses, treating all injured soldiers as brothers, healing their wounds, and restoring their health and life. Love heals the wounds caused by hatred and discord. We see its influence in the miracle that the golden rule performs in the business world, in the passion for social service, in the world at large, in the gradual abolition of class distinctions, in the growing efforts to improve the conditions of the poor, and in the great wave of reform hitting the walls of all our institutions, our prisons, poorhouses, correctional facilities, and asylums for the insane. The abuses that have filled these places are gradually being cleansed by love. In many of our prisons, the system of gentle and fraternal treatment that has been introduced genuinely helps to reform criminals. Whereas the old penal system killed men, broke their spirits, or hardened them in crime, rarely or never did it reform the prisoner. The path of love must ultimately banish completely the old cruel penal methods and eventually the criminal himself. When the world is governed by love according to the golden rule, crime will naturally die. Anyone who strays from the right path, regardless of what they have done, must receive another chance, a new opportunity to do good, to rebuild their character. Those who have sinned against society should not be excluded from the sympathy, goodwill, and kindness of their fellow beings. Offenders should be treated as unfortunate brothers and sisters who have stumbled and lost their way on the path of life. Love is the only means that will help them to rise again, to return to the current that leads to God. People who understand them, who see a God in the ruins caused by the influences of evil, would turn the great majority of our prisoners into good men and women. Many of these poor, unfortunate souls have never had a chance, never felt the magical touch of love, never known the influence of a good home with honest and loving parents. Most of them did not get a good start in life, were disadvantaged from birth by ignorance, illness, or a vicious background. The path of love would give them a fair chance, imprisoning people in narrow, miserable, and sunless cells without any of the amenities of human life, where no humanity reaches them, and subjecting them to treatment we would not dare inflict on our pets, is like trying to put out a fire with kerosene. Such treatment exacerbates their conditions, awakens their basest passions of vengeance, bitterness, and hatred, and fills them with a determination to get revenge on society. Society is beginning to realize the futility of these brutal methods and is starting to apply the path of love to its criminals across all classes. Our free hospitals, retirement homes for the elderly and poor, our public asylums, just like our prisons, are all moving towards the light. The fallen, the sick, the poor, the elderly, the disabled, the wounded, and those who suffer everywhere receive more consideration, humane treatment, and kindness. We discover that greater confidence, sympathy, and interest in our unfortunate brothers and sisters work a wonderful change in human conditions. In other words, despite many apparent contradictions, numerous evident ills in our milieu, many setbacks and discouragements, the Spirit of Christ of the Golden Rule acts as a healing leaven and performs miracles in the vast human mass. Love is the great opener of minds, the great opener of hearts, and enriches lives, the great developer. It is what keeps society united. And if children were educated to love humanity, to love all countries and their inhabitants as they are taught to love their own country and their fellow countrymen, there would be no wars. War largely stems from what is called patriotism, and patriotism in its narrowest sense, which seeks only its own good, its own expansion at the expense of other countries and peoples, has always been the curse of the race. When our love is great enough to say, "The world is my country," wars will cease. A few days ago, I was drawn to an advertisement in a morning newspaper saying, "When all other doctors have abandoned you, when you have found no relief in all other sources, then come to me." You are the kind of person who might be drawn to the ad, a healer, but the ad might also attract the desperate, the discouraged, those whom the usual profession has declared incurable, and it made me think, here is the language of the announcement of divine love. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. When you have not found comfort, satisfaction, or joy in anything else, when your friends have abandoned you, when your business is ruined, when you have made fatal mistakes and society has closed its doors on you, when everyone rejects and criticizes you, when everything else has failed, then come to me, and you will find peace and rest. Love is the sovereign remedy, the last resort for those driven to despair, when nothing else remains, when life is full of bitterness and anguish. The thief, the murderer, the failure, the outcast turns to love and finds refuge, for love never disappoints. Love is to every human being what maternal love is to the lost child. No son or daughter has fallen so low that a mother's love cannot follow them. When society turns its back on the outcast, when the prison door closes behind them, when companions flee, when sympathy and mercy are gone, when the world has forgotten them, the mother remembers and loves her child. She visits her son in the house of death, her daughter in the slums. The child can never stray too far for a mother's love to follow. This is the most perfect prototype of the love of our Father, Mother, God. The scriptures of Vedanta, which are thousands of years older than the Old Testament of our Bible, command us to love our neighbor as ourselves, because we are all neighbors through the unity of all life, because the same spirit is in all human beings. Until we see and live in conscious cooperation with this unity of spirit, until the world sees it in all human beings, there will be public struggles, private quarrels, greed, selfish ambition, inhumanity of man towards man, poverty, crime, all kinds of misfortunes and sufferings. Only love can eliminate all this. Human laws, repression, punishment will never achieve it. This is the way of Christ. The path of love contains the solution to all of life's problems. Recently, I spoke with a ruthless, arrogant, and intimidating entrepreneur who told me he was going to close his business because he was tired and fed up with the incompetent and dishonest help of his employees. He said that his employees were always taking advantage of him, stealing, damaging merchandise, creating disasters, calling in sick, and reducing their hours. They did not care about his well-being, they only concerned themselves with what they found in their paycheck. I have enough to live on. I don't intend to run a business for their benefit. I have tried every means I know to get good work from this ignorant and selfish help, but it's useless, and now I'm done with it, he concluded. Yep, you say you've tried everything to manage your employees, but have you considered trying the path of love? I asked him. Love, huh? He said with disgust. What do you mean by that? Well, if you didn't use a stick all the time, love might help you. It would penetrate you and ruin you. For years I had to employ detectives and spies to protect my interests. What do these people know about love? Because I would have the red flag here in no time, just as foolish as this matter. A young man who had successfully managed the golden role, upon learning of the situation, saw a possible opportunity and asked this man to test him as a manager before he completely left his business. The result was so satisfactory to him that within less than half an hour he had hired him as the director. Although he always claimed it was a very dubious experiment, the first thing the new man did upon taking office was to gather the employees from each department and have a sincere conversation with them. He told them that he had come not only as a friend of the owner, but also as a friend, that he would do everything in his power to promote their interests and those of the company, that they knew the house had been losing money for years and depended on him and them to change all that and put the balance on the right side of the ledger, showing them that harmony and cooperation were the foundation of any real success for a business and its employees. From the start, he was cheerful, optimistic, sympathetic, enthusiastic, and encouraging. In a short time, he gained the trust and goodwill of everyone in the establishment and managed to get all the employees to work for the success of the company as if it were their own. The place resembled a large hive, where everyone was hard-working, happy, and satisfied working for the hive. The change was so significant that customers began talking about the new spirit of the house. The business grew and prospered, and in very little time it was making money instead of losing it. However, in many respects, the new manager was not as capable as his employer, but he had a different spirit. He was driven by the belief in human brotherhood, had sympathy, tact, diplomacy, and a genuine personal interest in those working under him. He never reprimanded them when they did not do what was right. He simply spoke to them like an older brother and shamed them into better behavior, showing them a better way, and they followed it. In summary, he won their love and respect, and they would have done anything for him. The method of the Golden Rule had eliminated hatred, selfishness, greed, and dissension. All interests were focused on general well-being, and everyone thrived. When the owner returned from abroad, where he had gone to rest and recuperate for a few months, he could hardly believe the transformation that the method of love had wrought in his former employees and throughout the establishment. You who have been tormented and torn for years, driven by anxiety, fear, hatred, and malice, you who have already ended your life repeatedly, why not turn your back on all that and try the path of love? So far your life has been a disappointment. There must be a better way for all those who bear the scars and stains of the struggle, who have been beaten and battered by the old path of evil where there was no rest, no harmony, no sweetness. Why not try the path of love? Try it for every problem, every wound, and every pain. You whose domestic life has been a bitter disillusionment, you wives and husbands who have quarreled and have never known peace or comfort, try the path of love. It smooths out all the wrinkles. It brings a new spirit into your home that was never there before. It brings a new light to your eyes, a new hope to your heart, and joy to your life. You mothers who have worn yourselves out and aged prematurely trying to raise your children by scolding, punishing, and directing them, why not try the path of love? You can love your sons and daughters in a way that they will obey and respect you much more quickly, and with better results for both themselves and you than if you direct them in the usual way. Appeal to their best and noblest instincts rather than their worst, and you will be surprised at how quickly they will respond to this call. There is something in human nature that protests against being directed or forced. If you have tried to force your sons and daughters in the past, abandon that approach and try a new path, the path of love. See if it doesn't work wonders in your home, if it doesn't make your household run much more smoothly. See if it doesn't wonderfully relieve your concern for yourself. Try the path of love. Try it, homemaker who looks for scapegoats and scolds instead of reprimanding your family, who worries and laments from morning till night, who blames, reprimands, and complains. Try the path of love. Instead of scolding the maid in front of your guests when she accidentally breaks some dishes, put yourself in her place, try to understand her embarrassment, and lightly overlook the incident. Privately, gently give her a warning for the future. She will pay more attention. If she brings back a stained garment, or if her work is not as well done as before, do not reprimand her harshly. A rough treatment will only make her unhappy, but she will respond to kindness and gentle words. Instead of scolding and reprimanding, if you show sympathy and kindness, you will revolutionize your home. You will be delighted to discover how quickly the path of love can change the atmosphere within your family, how quickly useful relationships will replace antagonisms. Sincere, generous, and unreserved praise from time to time will hurt no one. On the contrary, it will act like a lubricating oil in a dry and squeaky machinery, and its effect will be reflected back on you in a magical way. You husbands who have replaced love with money and luxury, who have thought that if a woman has a beautiful home, fine clothes, and all her bills paid, she should be satisfied and happy. You who have so miserably failed in your goal, you will be surprised to find how much you can make your wife happier by giving her generous and selfless love. A little money and a very humble home with love will make a true woman happier than millions of dollars. Try the path of love. You men who have dominated your families by intimidating and threatening your wives and children, using methods of domestic servitude, you know that this old, brutal way has brought neither happiness nor satisfaction to anyone, and you have always been disappointed. So why not try the new philosophy? Try the path of love. It is the great remedy for everything. It is the remedy of Christ that transforms the world. Try it. You who are exhausted by quarrels and haggling, trials and tribulations you encounter daily in your business. You men and women who have never been able to find good help, despairing over the sabotage and wastefulness of your dishonest employees. You who have endured purgatory in your struggle against dishonesty and inefficiency, with faces etched with cruel lines and aged prematurely from fighting evil with evil. Try the path of love. It will create a new spirit in your store, factory, office, or whatever your enterprise, trials and difficulties. Love will soothe the jolts of life and miraculously open the way. Try the path of love, all those who have lived so far in purgatory because they did not know a better way. Have you tried the politics of pleasing, the method of hatred and resentment, the method of vengeance, jealousy, worry, and anxiety? And have they only further wounded and tortured you? Have you tried the law and courts to resolve problems and difficulties with neighbors and business partners, and perhaps won the lawsuits only to attract bitter enemies for life? Perhaps you have never truly tried the path of love, except superficially. If you have not yet tried it as a principle, as a philosophy of life, as the great lubricant of life, start now. It smooths out all the rough spots and wonderfully facilitates your journey through the jolts of life. You may wonder why you have so few friends, why others are not interested in you. Look into your heart, and you will find the reason. If you send out a current of selfishness, lack of charity, lack of kindness, indifference, and ingratitude, you cannot receive back the gift of love. According to what you give, you will receive, and the more generously you give love, kindness, and service, the more generously the current will return to you. The most beautiful thing on this earth, what every human being desires most, is love. As Henry Ward Beecher said, "The river of life in this world. Do not think you know those in the small tinkling brook at the first small spring, not until you have passed through the rocky gorges and not lost the current, not until you have crossed the prairie and the current has widened and deepened until fleets can sail upon its bosom, not until you have reached the unfathomable ocean beyond the prairie and poured your treasures into its depths. Not until then will you know what love is." Throughout the Bible, there are passages linking the height and depth, the breadth and power, the inexhaustibility of love. The more we love, the more we have. Love keeps perpetual summer in the soul and extinguishes the cold of winter. Love for humanity is love for God. Love for God prolongs life. "With long life will I satisfy him," says Jehovah in the words of the psalmist, "because he has set his love upon me." Love is harmony, and harmony prolongs life. While fear, jealousy, envy, friction, and discord shorten it, those who are filled with the spirit of love, whose sympathies extend not only to their own family, but to all members of the human family, are more free from the ills of humanity than the selfish and pessimistic who miss the best part of life, the joy and strength that come from giving to others. Some natures are so imbued with the spirit of love, help, and interest that their mere presence acts like a balm on a wounded soul. They radiate harmony, the sunshine of the soul. There is a personal charm in them that strengthens, soothes, and uplifts. Never has a more scientific advice been given on this earth than love your enemies. Nothing will remove the sting of malice like kindness. Nothing will disarm prejudices, hatred, and jealousy like love. It is impossible for someone to continue to hate us when we send only thoughts of love, vibrations of love, or to be jealous of us when we send only friendly, generous, and helpful thoughts. Hatred or the spirit of vengeance cannot exist in the presence of love, just as an acid cannot retain its corrosive qualities in the presence of a base. One whose heart is filled with love for all cannot long have an enemy, for love dissolves all enmity and jealousy. Unilateral hatred cannot exist because there is nothing to nourish it, and the fire will go out for lack of fuel. It is simply impossible to continue to feel antipathy toward another, to hate them for long, when we find that they are friendly toward us and willing to help. I have never felt so humiliated in my life as when, years ago in my ardent youth, a man whom I found extremely disagreeable and against whom I had harbored a grudge for some time, did me a great, generous and heartfelt service, which was a real help to me. He completely shamed me. He showed me, as nothing else could have, how petty, unworthy and contemptible it is to harbor feelings of hatred or vengeance toward a fellow being. We cannot maintain a thought of love without feeling the elevation, the radiance, the divine energy it sends through the entire system. On the other hand, we cannot maintain thoughts of hatred, vengeance, jealousy, envy, or any other petty and selfish thoughts without feeling a sense of depression, smallness, and contempt that robs us of our self-respect and power. When we blame and condemn others, when we nurture bitterness and malice in our hearts, we set in motion boomerang vibrations that harm our lives and seriously compromise our happiness and effectiveness. One of the great benefits of devotional exercise, prayer, and contemplation of divine thought is that this mental attitude sets in motion vibrations that have a beneficial and uplifting influence on both the mind and body. When love and affection vibrate throughout the cellular life, they develop a fullness and serenity of character, a gentleness and strength, a peace and satisfaction that reinforce the entire being. Love relieves and strengthens where hatred wrinkles and weakens the character of those who are constantly troubled by discordant emotions, living in homes where perpetual disputes, criticism, reprimands, mockery, coldness, skepticism, lack of affection and selfishness prevail. Their effects become murmuring. Nothing except vice distorts character as quickly as living in an atmosphere of perpetual hatred, jealousy, envy, and vengeance. The wear and tear of their vicious vibrations never cease to perform their deadly work. Love is the great disciplinarian, the supreme harmonizer, the true peacemaker, the great balm for everything that ruins happiness or generates discontent, a sovereign remedy against malice, vengeance, and all passions. Just as cruelty melts away under kindness, so too do bad passions find their antidote in gentle charity and loving sympathy. One of the reasons why a happy home is the sweetest and most beautiful place on earth is because the atmosphere of love, the vibrations of harmony, provide a blessed sense of unity, rest, security, and power. As soon as we enter such a place, we feel its soothing, reassuring, and uplifting atmosphere. It produces a sensation of mental calm and serenity that we do not experience anywhere else. During a recent visit to a large family, I was deeply impressed by the power of one person to create this home spirit. In this family, there was a sister who, although the youngest, seemed to take the place of the deceased mother. This young girl was the obvious center of the home. None of her brothers made any important decisions without consulting her. None of them left the house without giving her a goodbye kiss. And she was the first one they turned to when they came home. They all seemed eager to confide their little secrets to her, to tell her what had happened to them during the day, and to seek her opinion and advice on all their difficulties. The secret of this young girl's influence lies in her great interest in her brothers and her wonderful love for them. Talking with the brothers, I found that each thought his sister was particularly interested in him and his affairs, and they did not consider undertaking or saying anything important without consulting her first. Each of them seemed to prefer her company to that of any other girl, and they were always proud to accompany her wherever she went. All these boys were frank, open, sincere, and chivalrous, and I couldn't help but think that their great qualities were largely due to the influence of their sister. To love and be loved, says Sydney Smith, is the greatest happiness of existence. Everyone, rich and poor, great and small, seeks love. It is not uncommon for a man to seek the love of someone who embodies his ideal of femininity, someone in whom he sees all the beautiful qualities he himself lacks. This love is, in reality, a divine hunger, the desire to possess what would complete him, rather than the half he thinks he is. That is why when a coarse, brutal, and dissipated man falls in love with a sweet and pure young girl, he immediately changes his way of being. He holds his head high, reflects, asserts himself, abandons his blasphemies, becomes more refined, more elevated in his language, more selective in his associations, and, at least in appearance, becomes a changed man for the moment. Simply because love is a more powerful motive for a man than dissipation, he abandons the latter. And if his love is firm and true, he will never again engage in degrading practices. Who has not seen the magical power of love to transform rough and coarse men into refined and devoted husbands? I have known women who had a heart so large, so affectionate and so helpful, and a charm in their manner so great that even the worst men, the most hardened characters, would do anything for them, including giving their lives to protect them. But these men could not be reformed by punitive methods. They could not be touched by a lack of kindness or by coercion. Only love is the power that can touch them. I do not believe there is a human being in prison or outside of it so depraved, so low, so wicked, that someone in the world cannot master perfectly by love, by kindness, by patience. Many men have been deterred from committing a shameful act, a criminal act, by the thought that someone loved them, believed in them, trusted them. So even if your sins are like scarlet, they will become white as snow. Love purifies, elevates, regenerates. We all know its wonderful transforming power, how it erases the scars of sin, smooths out the wrinkles that vice has left on the face, softens harsh features and puts its own divine stamp upon them. We know how it transforms the coarse, brutal and sinful man into its divine image, how it brings color back to pale cheeks, brightness to dull eyes, how it makes the despairing courageous, the hopeless hopeful. We know how it brings a light to a face that was never there before. In the remarkable play The Third Floor Back, we have a striking illustration of the subtle and silent power of love. Those who have seen or read the play will remember how, in response to an advertisement in a London newspaper for a room to rent on the third floor back, an extraordinary man arrives called the Stranger. This man takes the room on the third floor back and finds himself in a boarding house full of dubious characters, thieves, gamblers, and people who have led fast lives, all kinds of uncharitable and envious men and women. They all engage in various petty misdeeds, with one woman even stealing candles. All of them try to deceive one another and are deceived in turn. The landlady is of the same ilk as her boarders. She takes advantage of them, and they take advantage of her. She waters down the milk and adulterates the food, and then, to prevent theft, she locks everything up. The mere presence of the stranger seemed antithetical to the low practices and ideals of the boarders and the landlady. They began to mock him, but he paid no attention to them. On the contrary, he responded to their lack of kindness with kindness, to hatred with love, and to their sarcastic and biting remarks with a simple, pleasant smile. Gradually, as they got to know him better, he began to talk about them, to point out their good qualities, and to show the great capacities they possessed in certain areas, the wonders that were possible for them. One of the young men who had made fun of him told him that he had a good artistic temperament and that he had the makings of a great artist. To another, he showed his possibilities as a musician, and so on, with all the members of the noisy and discordant group, until all were eventually enchanted by his love and kindness. The young London maid, who was in charge of all the work and mistreated, was constantly reminded that she had been in state prison and was thus considered a nobody. Under the uplifting influence of the stranger, she became a noble woman who respected herself. The landlady, who had previously treated the young girl as a slave, began to favor her and allowed her to go out for a change while still doing her work. A man and a woman who had led a cat-and-dog life reconciled and lived in harmony. All the boarders, without exception, even those who had been the most brutal and selfish, gradually changed to become considerate, helpful, and friendly toward each other. They became friends, and the entire atmosphere of the house changed. The stranger had shown each of them their best selves, and in doing so, he had literally transformed them. Thus, embodying the Spirit of Christ, a simple and quiet man who loved his fellow beings and found his greatest joy in serving others, had diverted all these people from the twisted paths they had been on and had led them onto the right path to happiness. Love, by revealing to them these possibilities of becoming superior beings, had transformed them. This is the way of love. Love soothes even the fiercest animals. How quickly their wild and ferocious expressions are replaced by gentler, kinder, softer expressions under the loving treatment of someone who truly loves them, someone who looks at them as St. Francis did, with his little mute brothers and sisters. The raw nature gradually softens, mistrust gives way to trust, the suspicious look is replaced by a trusting gaze, and affection takes the place of antipathy and fear. Love responds to love. Is there a more beautiful illustration in nature of the influence of love and kind treatment than the evolution of our domestic dogs from fierce wolves? Observe the peaceful and calm face of a cow or a horse that has been raised as a family pet. These animals would not trample on us or harm a child any more than we would ourselves. We love them and trust them, and they love and trust us. Love begets love. Some people confuse selfishness or self-love with true love. Everywhere we see the type of Bill's substitute who says, "If you do this for me, I'll do that for you." The woman who tells a man, not with her heart, but with her lips, "If you keep me and give me a home, I will love you," does not love. It is selfishness. Many people confuse the love of the things given with love for the one who gives them. They confuse love for their own comforts, good times, clothing, and luxuries, with love for the person who provides these things. It is a mere parody of what is genuine. True love simply loves and asks nothing in return. There is no me in it. Abuse, bitterness, indifference, and ingratitude do not change or destroy love. It simply continues to call, and no love is ever lost, whether it is reciprocated or not. True love is a force that always triumphs, even if it is not shared. It triumphs by purifying, softening, elevating, beautifying, and enriching the life of the one who loves. This is the way of love. What mothers endure for their children over many years would kill or drive half of them mad in less time if it were not for love. It is the balm that heals all wounds, that lightens all burdens, that removes the heaviness of service. Only love enables the poor mother to risk her life for her child, to go through terrible experiences in her struggle against poverty and illness to raise her children. A burden half as heavy without love would take her life, but love lessens the burden, removes the sting of poverty and the pain of sacrifice. The same goes for the loving father. Although his burden by nature is rarely as heavy as that of the mother, he is often almost a slave for half his life or more for those he loves. And if he is a real man, he does not complain. Love lessens the burden and cheers the path. Where the heart is, there is lightness of burden. A new commandment I give unto you, love one another as I have loved you. In the strict observance of this commandment lies the salvation of the world. Among the noble souls of our time who have tried to live according to this precept, one of the most remarkable was Count Leo Tolstoy. In one of his beautiful stories, Tolstoy shows how anyone, regardless of their position or the poverty of their circumstances, can do this by following the example of the master, treating each human being as we would a beloved member of our own family. According to the story, a very devout Russian peasant had prayed for years for the master to come to his humble hut one day. One night, he had a vision where the master appeared to him and said that he would come to his hut the next day. Filled with joy, the peasant awoke. So real seemed the vision to him that he got up and immediately set to work, preparing his hut and himself for the expected celestial guest. A terrible storm of freezing rain and snow raged throughout the day as he carried out his simple domestic tasks, stacking fresh wood in his rudimentary fireplace, preparing his pot of cabbage soup, the daily fare of Russian peasants. The man watched the storm with anxious, expectant eyes. At one point, he saw a poor, half-frozen peddler with his sack on his back, struggling to reach the light, but on the verge of being overcome by the fierce gusts of slush that whipped at him. The peasant hurried to bring the traveller into his hut, dried his clothes, warmed him up, gave him some cabbage soup to eat, and then sent him on his way, comforted and joyful. Soon after he saw another traveller, a poor old woman weakly trying to make her way through the snow. The peasant also took her into his hut, warmed her, fed her, wrapped her in his own coat, and strengthened and encouraged, sent her on her way as well. The day passed slowly and darkness was approaching, but there was still no sign of the master. Hoping against hope, The man once more went to the door of his hut, and looking into the storm, saw a small child unable to move against the slush and ice. He took the half-frozen child in his arms, carried him to the hut, warmed him, fed him, and soon the young wanderer fell asleep by the fire. Very disappointed that the master did not appear, the peasant sat watching the fire, and as he watched, he suddenly fell asleep. The room was suddenly illuminated by a light that did not come from the fire, and there stood the master, dressed in white and serene, looking at him with a smile. "Oh, master, I waited and watched all this long day, but you did not come," said the peasant. The master replied, "3 times I visited your hut. The poor peddler you saved, warmed and fed was me. The poor woman to whom you gave your coat was me, and the little child you saved from the storm was me." The vision of Christ faded. The peasant awoke alone with the child smiling in his sleep, but he knew that the master had visited his hut. The love of God, in speaking these words, made my whole being tremble with light. The firmament did not seem divided by the red lightning that roars above, when a moment in heaven and earth blend like that for a dazzling space. My heart was broken, and I gazed, but all that I had heard had fled and did not return. But on my way along the sidewalk through the market, sometimes the eyes of a stranger met mine. You too, I think. We do not speak, we do not make signs, but something seems to pass from heart to heart, and I am filled with joy all that day.